Okay.
Great. Well, I will officially call the meeting to order. And I will start with some announcements. One, we were able to have a almost completely traditional Memorial Day ceremony this year. We had, pretty decent turnout, and, we hope to have the expanded and restored parade next year again. But I really would like to thank the rec department and the beautification committee, who were so great in, making Main Street look so great, obviously around the memorials, but really all of Main Street. So hats off to them. And then secondly, Wednesday, I will have the pleasure of announcing the winners of the IEF photo contest at the Octagon House. So that's just kind of a fun thing. I can't announce the winners tonight because I don't think they've heard yet. So, but that's an exciting event that's happening Wednesday night. And thanks to the IEF for inviting me to be one of the 5 judges on that. So that's all I have for announcements, unless anybody else has any announcements.
Oh, there's a movie night on Thursday.
Yeah.
The theater's first live event. Buy your tickets, $12.
And it's outside at the
Outside, live music.
at the Main Street School, I believe.
Yes,
you know what
the
time it starts?
grassy area behind Main Street.
Does it start at 7?
7, I'm going to say, but go online, support the theater.
IrvingtonTheater.org, I believe.
And one of the
Next,
local eateries I think, has a deal to get food, to eat, hear music.
great. Anybody else have anything? Oh, Brenda, I just saw you pop on. I noticed when I was reviewing the invoices this week, next week, I guess we'll have there's a certiorari check that's over 25,000. So just a quick heads up on that. But if
Brenda, you're on mute.
Thanks for reminding me. I put that in the last minute for payment.
Perfect. Yeah, so no worries. We just
No, I'll write that down. Thank you.
Sure. Next up is correspondence. Correspondence related to the public hearing. I will stay for the public hearing, but there is some additional correspondence. The first one is from Chet Kerr about replacement of welcome signs on Broadway. Since they're posted and to save time, I won't read them all. I'll just kind of give a summary of what they're about. I think Chet, we will, I spoke to Larry, we will look into this and find out where that stands at the current time. The next non-related to the public hearing one was about dogs and allowing dogs in Matheson Park. I think this board and I think the recreation department knows and appreciates how important dogs are to everyone in Irvington. And as soon as possible, as soon as we are able to, allow dogs back into Matheson Park, we will allow them. We just really want to get the understanding of how it's going to work with bicycles and, scooters and all those types of things, and the new flows and dogs. So we just need a little bit of time, but we're asking you to bear with us. But you don't have to convince us that people love their dogs in Irvington, myself included. Next up was from Ann Altman about leaf blowers. Quick, I plan on sending out an email about this as well, but as of May 15th, gas-powered leaf blowers are no longer allowed during the summer months. They'll be back again, I guess, for the fall cleanup. But if you do see them, you can feel free to call the Irvington Police Department, 591-8080. They have been issuing summonses to anyone using gas-powered leaf blowers. It does seem to be, a few landscapers, but hopefully that'll be cleared up soon. And lastly, Lori Regan wrote us a letter about adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. To be honest, that our statement on tolerance and anti-hate has been put on hold while we've been working on the rezoning, and we look forward to getting back to that soon. And I believe those are the only non-public hearing related correspondence, unless someone else remembers differently. So if no one else remembers differently, I will move ahead to public comment for anything not related to the public hearing. So any other events or items not on the agenda for this evening? just raise your hand. Looks like we have a few. Lisa again?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mayor Smith. Thank you, Board of Trustees. I wanted to talk about two issues very quickly tonight in public comment. One is I wanted to commend the Village of Ardsley for having alternating pride and American flags kind of adorning the village during this month. June is Pride Month, and I would love for the board, if possible, to consider doing something similar in Irvington. I don't know if it's feasible to do so for this Pride Month in June, but it just sends a really wonderful and very inclusive message to our LGBTQ community and neighbors, and for all of us to be able to kind of celebrate and also reflect on the importance of that month. So that's the first point. The second point, I was really glad to hear, Mayor Smith, you say that you're considering the anti-hate declaration, and that's something I understand that's been put on hold for the rezoning, so that you're not dealing with it right now. But when you do, I just wanted to add something to the correspondence you've already seen on this issue from me, which is to commend to you the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism, which is a response to the IHRA definition that deals with some of the concerns I raised around free speech and sort of making sure that we protect people's ability to criticize Israel to the extent that that is, you know, everybody's prerogative to do. And it does a really fine job of kind of separating that out from what clearly are anti-Semitic acts, which have been happening and which are a source of great concern for me as a Jewish American. So I would love for the board to kind of re-engage with that issue, but to look at this Jerusalem Declaration as a model if there's going to be kind of a provision in the general Declaration on Anti-Semitism. And then the last thing I wanted to note is I noted in the same letter on this issue that there was a reference to Juneteenth, and it was a fairly derogatory reference to it as a quote unquote faux holiday. And I just wanted to say that I was, you know, I found that as somebody who'd like to think I'm an ally, I found that a really hurtful and kind of demeaning way to refer to the village's efforts. And I, for one, am very grateful that the village is pursuing efforts to recognize Juneteenth to make it an official holiday. And I would say that, you know, one of the threads I saw in the letter is that one, people's pain and trauma, you know, shouldn't it kind of recognizing it is at the expense of another. So we can't simultaneously be working on anti-Black racism and working to kind of rectify that and also simultaneously be declaring that we're against anti-Semitism. And I think that's just wrong. I love that the village is pursuing a broader declaration. And I think that kind of mentality also flies in the face of decades-long alliance between Black and Jewish Americans in the fight for everybody's civil rights. So I know I'm probably close to time, but I just want to spend 1 second reading a quote from Martin Luther King. I was actually at the memorial in DC this weekend. I think it speaks to this very issue. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And that's how I feel as a Jewish American about threats to my Black friends and neighbors. And I think they feel the same way about threats to me. And that's certainly how I would like for us to unite as a community. Thank you so much for your time.
And you did it in exactly 3 minutes. So thanks for the reminder. I was going to say it for the public hearing, but it also serves for this portion. If we keep public comment to 3 minutes or less, we appreciate it. You can always speak again later. But thanks, Lisa. Lori?
Thank you all. So I guess now I'm forced to address a couple of the points that Lisa raised, although I do want to, I've requested a couple of times to find out where you all are on the IHRA definition adoption. And Brian, you used the reference to a statement of tolerance. So my first point is that I hope that whatever statement this town puts out addresses anti-Semitism solely as anti-Semitism, and I will follow up with something in writing on that. I know that we have lots of concerns about attacks on Asian Americans. We have lots of concerns about Black Americans that have faced violence on their own streets or from white police officers or whatnot. But what Jews are facing in the world today is not comparable. What Jews have faced for the past 3,000 years is not comparable. And I know that Lisa loves hiding behind the fact that she's a Jewish American, but she celebrates Nakba Day. For somebody who's offended by some of the things that I wrote in that letter, this is Nakba Day. I've made a point in my other letters is celebration of destroying the state of Israel. So what Lisa's credibility has is actually zero. And I'm not going to address any of the rest of that because you can't celebrate the destruction of Israel and then hide behind being Jewish. I will also add, though, that Martin Luther King Jr. did say that he wishes that people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And so I know that this town is focused a lot on things that relate to people with people of color. Martin Luther King Jr. was not caring about the color of people's skin. As far as the Jerusalem Declaration, I will be putting in writing why the Jerusalem Declaration is not appropriate at all for adoption. But again, Brian and Board of Trustee members, I appreciate the time and the consideration. And I hope that you read through the information that I send, because this is complicated stuff and it's not as simple as just adopting a statement of tolerance. Jews are being attacked. They are being murdered. They are being physically assaulted. There are calls for Jewish women to be raped across cities across this country, London, and across the world. This is something that I know you're not, most of the people on this board, I don't think any of you are Jewish. Some of you may be, but you cannot distinguish between 3,000 years of hate and glom it on to other forms of hate. This is unique. This is dangerous. Jews are facing potentially a second Holocaust in coming decades if we do not nip this in the bud now. And I feel passionately about it, as you know, and again, I will follow up in writing, but I do hope that this is something that becomes a priority and that you all do adopt the IHRA definition, which has been adopted by 30 plus countries, universities, police forces, towns and cities across the country and world for a reason. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. Arlene?
Hi, I'm gonna stay away from a tit for tat, but I wrote a letter in response to seeing Juneteenth called as a faux holiday. So I'm just gonna quickly read my letter because I know it came after the cutoff. So I think for many white Americans, Juneteenth is a holiday that they just learned about in the last year. Black Americans have been celebrating Juneteenth with family gatherings, parades, and community celebrations for countless numbers of years. I find it ironic that in a letter calling for a repudiation of hate against Jewish people, the author calls Juneteenth a faux holiday. It seems that the author is ignorant of other people's culture and religious traditions, and as a result, she feels comfortable dismissing not only a cultural celebration for Black Americans, but a holiday that marks the emancipation of their ancestors. I find it aberrant that she refers to Juneteenth as a faux holiday, completely offending not only Black Americans, but all of us that should stand in solidarity. This is yet again a whitewashing of what constitutes a holiday. Our family does not observe or celebrate Ramadan or Rosh Hashanah, among other holidays. However, that does not mean that we do not stand in solidarity with our Muslim and Jewish friends and respect their right to celebrate and observe. We would never disrespect anyone by referring to anyone else's celebrations or holidays as faux. It is disrespectful as a community when we see hate, intolerance, and ignorance. We need to name it and stand against it. Even when someone, in response to someone calling for us to stand up against anti-Semitism, which we should as a community, but we shouldn't do that while attacking other people. I thank the board for recognizing Juneteenth as a village holiday, and I look forward to the celebration rally that is being planned and paid for by private citizens of our community. In addition, several organizations have co-sponsored this year's second annual Juneteenth celebration rally, including the PTSA Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Arts Westchester, Irvington Activists, Commemorate, St. Barnabas Episcopal Church, and Historic Hudson Valley. Juneteenth also promises to be a community event that will unite us and bring customers to our local businesses. Among the businesses participating in Juneteenth by offering specials are MP Taverna, Chutney Masala, Irvington Pizza Company, Red Barn Bakery, Farm Eats, Jordanes, and hopefully others. I think, I hope we see everyone on Main Street on June 19th from 2 to 5 p.m. And again, this is a moment where we need to sort of stand up as a community and, come together and not be divided and pulled apart in, this like contest about, one versus the other. I think most people do not feel that way. And I thank the board for your time and, and taking the the time to recognize Juneteenth. So thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Cox.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks very much for this opportunity. I'm just going to speak for less than 15 seconds about Juneteenth and the sorry misconception by one member of our community that the holiday is fake. Most of us do not have the stomach to look over our shoulder and stare directly at the evil on which our country stands. Despite the centrality of slavery in our history, it is not central to the American narrative. Yet for 155 years, Juneteenth has been celebrated in countless communities in countless ways across the United States. So now we have the opportunity, and I would say responsibility, to acknowledge the horror of slavery for millions of men, women, and children, and at the same time celebrate their emancipation and their freedom. I couldn't be more pleased and proud that Irvington is doing its part to change the narrative. I say a million thanks to the Juneteenth Planning Committee for pulling this sanctioned state holiday and the rest of us into the light. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like that's it for public comment right now. There's another chance at the end. We will move to the consent agenda. Did everyone have any questions on the consent agenda from the board? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we'll move to the continuation of the public hearing to consider a local law amending the zoning code to create the multifamily office district. You know, we've been talking about this for a long time. I still feel like there is a lot of misconceptions about exactly what we're doing. So I thought it would be, somewhat important to at least give a 1 minute summary of what we're actually doing and why we're doing it. What we're proposing is a new zoning code. That doesn't mean that there is a project that's impending. It doesn't mean that there's a developer waiting to develop. It doesn't mean that anyone can build anything if we pass this zoning. What it will do is it will legalize the current uses, which have been office use since the early 1970s, that are all by special permit. And things were different in the 1970s. It was, you kind of came to a board and said, hey, I'd like to use offices. And they said, all right, we'll figure out a way. And they kind of did it through, special permits. It's not quite the rigor that we had now. So we thought that was important to have office use. We also thought it was important to change it to multifamily because it's two of the last remaining kind of larger tracts of land. Kind of anything more than 4 acres is kind of considered large in Irvington. It's also located on Broadway, so there's potential for good transportation. Using public transportation as well as entering, exiting right off of Broadway, not through smaller roads, things like that. We'd also had a very contentious proposal from a developer that had also divided the community. So we thought we wanted to try to figure out what the community would like there. And that started again back in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan committee came up with recommendations, a lot of them were to protect the open area when you first come into Irvington. When you obviously, if you're heading south on the left-hand side, there's that big grassy area, and then there's a pretty large setback on the next piece of property as well. And I think everyone agreed, this board included, that was important. That's why we actually have, more than doubled the setback in our proposal. Right now, it's I believe it's 125 for new buildings. It's only 50 for existing buildings is the setback currently. We propose 300, and if you do, you have to jump through some hoops. You might get it down to being allowed to have 2-story buildings at 250 feet back. So even at the more generous setback, it's still twice as much as you have now. I think we also thought it was very important to protect the economic viability of that area. There again, it's their large pieces of land, so it's fairly expensive in Irvington. As obviously Irvington land is at a premium. We felt it was important that what we didn't want to see was it go to become a not-for-profit. Some of the interest in the sites had been from not-for-profits because they're ambivalent about taxes. They don't care about taxes because once they buy it, they don't have to pay taxes anymore. So they could kind of afford it. Office use, which has been the historic use, isn't necessarily the most economically viable now either, which is why we looked at the multifamily. And if you go back in the history of this zoning proposal, we had a lot of other potential uses. I think what we heard loud and clear from the neighbors, especially on Strawberry Lane, was commercial uses were not the best uses for that land. They moved there; it was residentially zoned, even though it was used for offices. But things like restaurants that could be open late at night, have outdoor seating, convention centers that could have loud weddings on weekends and things like that were not viewed favorably. So that's why I think we streamlined it. And I think also we thought it was important to expand the housing stock and the variety of housing in Irvington. We haven't had a lot of development in Irvington, frankly, in the last 20, 30 years. With the exception of the DiNardo project that's now stalled. We haven't really had any kind of large scale building, and we really felt it was important to potentially expand that housing stock. Along those lines, affordable housing is one aspect of that. We also think kind of workforce housing is important, especially if it can benefit our village workers and our school employees. That's why we looked to kind of say not just we didn't have it be just bonuses just for affordable, but also for that kind of forgotten middle, as we've heard from a lot of the housing people around the county, which we think is important. If you have a teacher and a police officer, they don't qualify for affordable housing, but they might not be able to live in Southern Westchester. So we want them to live here. We want to have as much economic diversity as we possibly can. So we were trying to balance all of those things, and I think that we've probably made nobody happy, and everybody has an opinion on what's wrong with the proposed zoning and what could be better or what we could take out. We've changed it quite a bit. I think it's been fairly stable for about 6-7 months, maybe 8 months, with the smaller tweaks. But I think that we have a much better proposal before us today than we did 2 years ago. And that's a lot of it is because of the great input we received from residents. I really appreciate all the work of the people on Strawberry Lane. There's been a handful of people that have been at, I call them the perfect attendance club, but they've had to rearrange their lives to participate in this conversation. And I personally, I think it's a much better proposal now than it was 2 years ago for sure. With that being said, Mary Ann, I don't know if you want to go over the changes from the last draft to this draft. I think you're on mute.
You're on mute, Mary Ann, you're mute.
Okay. There's only a few changes in there. I'll go through them quickly. The first three all relate to the same thing. It's the definition of who's eligible for senior citizen housing. Previously, it had to be occupied by at least one adult aged 62 or over, and that was changed to 55 or over. That's because under the Fair Housing Act, the exceptions for age-restricted housing are either where everyone is over 62 or one person is 55. Don't ask me, it doesn't make sense, but we wanted to meet, since it is could be, the definition's not proper of the exception to the Fair Housing Act, we have to make it coincide. So it was changed to at least one adult age 55 or plus, which seemed to make more sense than everybody being 62 or over. So those were the changes on page 1 and 2. Then a requirement, well, on the senior citizen housing under the Fair and Affordable Housing Act requirements of the code, because it's multifamily, 10% of the units would have to be affordable. And we added a provision that in the senior citizen housing, no less than 15% of the total number of senior citizen housing units must be created as fair and affordable housing units. So the affordable set aside went up from 10% to 15% for the senior housing. All right, the change on page 5 is pretty small. Instead of just saying coverage, I added building and lot coverage. Somebody pointed out that they thought it was confusing, so it's confusing to them. It could be confusing to others. And then the last change is, well, my numbers could be different than yours, but it's toward the end, page 16. As drafted before, there would not have been a density bonus for an all affordable project. So it was added the same density provision, the same density bonus that you would get for including moderate income units, 20%, you would get if you do an entire all affordable housing project. But that density bonus, it specifies, doesn't apply to senior citizen housing. And those are the changes.
Great. One other item that I think we wanted to, kind of lead off the meeting with was Larry had gotten the numbers from the Greenberg assessor, so we could put together the potential tax ramifications or revenue ramifications of the different proposals, kind of the current base case, and then I think these all assume kind of full build out of each different type. So, we've talked before that full build outs of any of these projects are unlikely, but for comparison's sake, that's what we used for the comparison here.
Yeah. So I did go through and get some answers from the town assessor just to help us with some of the projected tax numbers. I have a sheet which was attached to the agenda. I can put it on the screen here, and I'll explain my assumptions as I went through it. All right. So just starting off with the base case, which is what the current property taxes are. And I'm only looking at the two largest of the properties. Certainly could have gone into the smaller ones, but they're really of much less consequence. So current property taxes on the two largest of the properties. And again, this represents town, county, village, and school district taxes combined. And they're round numbers, as you can see. One of the units of measure that was suggested by some of the board members was to compare what a single family development would generate. The assumption was 1 acre zoning, which is what's there currently. 7 homes is also a rough estimate, and that's 7 homes combined on the two properties. I believe the KEF Equities Carafiello property was designated at 4 homes that could be built, and again, that's realistically including site improvements and access roads, things like that, and then the Maxon was assumed to be 3.
And I think also, Larry, on the Carafiello property especially, it's a large piece of property, but there's a lot of steep slopes in the back that are pretty much unbuildable.
That's correct. Yeah, and when just to put it in perspective, when the zoning was half-acre zoning, there was a development that was proposed and had been grandfathered for a bit of time. It's no longer grandfathered because the property has since sold. But that was proposing 6 homes. There was 6 lots that were determined to be buildable, and that was at half-acre zoning. So I just kind of not just cut it in half, but even rounded up by 1. So it's 4 on 1 acre lots, 3 on Maxon. Again, I picked higher end homes based on the land values of those properties, and that's the property taxes here, $450,000. Now for the other 2 sections of this. So we looked at both ends of the ranges here. First of all, the overall assumption, this is not a maximum build out, but it's a realistic estimate of what could be built. So we assume that 1 lot would be developed as senior units and the other lot would be developed as non-senior units. And so that comes out, I actually rounded a number here. It's 155 units is what it comes to, but it was nice and neat and clean to do 156 here. So then of those units, simply assume that there'd be an even breakout between 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Obviously, there could be a different mix depending on what would ever get proposed. And then we took this set of assumptions, which is summarized here, applied monthly rents. In the case of affordable, those are rents which were taken right from guidelines published by Westchester County, which are HUD guidelines for monthly rentals. Based upon this level of rental income for the property, and that's where I needed the assistance of the assessor, the taxes generated will be $621,000. That's the estimate across all levels of government. Same rationale for the number of units on the market rate, which would again be the other side of the scale. So in terms of lowest amount of tax generated, that would be 100% affordable. And highest amount, of course, would be market rate. And these are the rental amounts that were assumed. These were taken from some similar developments, actually in some of the neighboring towns as well. And you can see the taxes generated there. So I think this helps answer at least some of the questions as it related to the amount of tax generated versus the amount of services that would be required by the units that are here. And we have certainly checked with our, the 2 important departments which relate to emergency services, police and fire, and they don't believe that there would be a need for any significant additional equipment or personnel. So from a village standpoint, we don't see this as an issue related to taxes.
Great, thank you, Larry. And I would actually even add that the multifamily market rate, I don't believe they can actually even qualify for 156 units because you have to have an additional affordable to get all the bonuses. But for comparison's sake, we'll leave it that way. But the number would probably be somewhere in between those two. Yeah. One other number that I'll just add was people were asking about schools and school capacity. I believe it was 2004, 2005. The Irvington schools had 1,998 students. I spoke to Chris Harrison for an updated number last week. This year we have 1,735. So, again, you can't predict how many students would potentially, be in one grade. And that's the only way you could potentially increase costs dramatically is you had to add another teacher or something. But, we are capacity wise, building wise, things like that. They are well below their peak. And, there were plans at one point that they'd be, close to 2,200 or 2,300. So some of the buildings are actually, designed to be larger. If you remember, we had modulars and things like that while the building was going on. But even with the inflows in recent years, we're still, between 150 and 250 below kind of the peak years of the mid 2000s. So those are the only numbers that I had to add tonight. I think we're going to now open it up again for public comment, which we always find is the most useful and interesting part of this discussion. I will remind everybody again that there's a 3-minute limit. We will be listening, and then if some of the comments have questions or things we would like to address, we will do that at the end. So with that being said, Larry, why don't we open it up for questions? I think we have 2 hands up already.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, members of the Board of Trustees. Mr. Chauffeur, my name is Steve Maffia. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I specialize in traffic engineering. I submitted my review of the proposed amendment on June 4th, and I would like to just summarize what my findings are, and that I had basically 2 major issues in that memo, and I'll just discuss them very briefly here tonight. First, I found that the language in the amendment regarding requirements to determine significant adverse traffic impacts was somewhat insufficient to determine and thereby avoid possible substantial worsened congestion along North Broadway and at area intersections. With the amendment's requirements only applying to existing roadway poor levels of service, like levels of service E and F, other significant level of service degradations could occur, but not trigger detailed analysis and mitigation. For example, a degradation of level of service B to level of service D is significant, but would not call for a detailed analysis or any identification of mitigation under the amendment's current language. Second, regarding the AKRF memo that the board is relying on to support their decision, I concluded that the memo did not really evaluate the maximum potential build out. They included only 2 of the 4 North Broadway properties. Also, other permitted uses in that zoning amendment could generate more traffic than the age-restricted units used by AKRF. Their estimated numbers would certainly be higher with the maximum build-out of all 4 lots, and possibly a different mix of the permitted uses, a combination of the 2 or a single more intense traffic generator. Then after presenting a traffic generation, AKRF's analysis was based on having it only a partial build-out, which cannot really be considered the maximum build-out. AKRF concluded that the peak hour trips would be relatively small, given the current volumes on North Broadway. In my experience, that conclusion cannot be the basis for precluding a more detailed traffic analysis. That analysis should be done with a more accurate trip generation estimates and a level of service analysis at critical North Broadway intersections. I also reviewed a recent detailed analysis by JMC Site Development Consultants for Brightview Senior Development. And after reviewing that analysis and based on observations of existing queuing and congestion at many of the North Broadway intersections, it's clear that even a small percentage of percent increase in traffic on streets adjacent to and near the proposed zone would cause or exacerbate the long delays and long queues at many intersections along North Broadway. Not finding out about that potential impact on intersections or lane groups in terms of longer wait times and degradation in level of service, I would call that a notable omission from the AKRF memo. It should be there. This is also inconsistent with the seeker requirements to take a hard look at potential impacts. I concluded basically that the village should require a properly conducted comprehensive traffic study that includes the following 4 items.
You're at just a little over 3 minutes, so if you try to wrap up, you can always speak again at the end.
Okay, I have just a few more points here, but if you want me to, I'll wait to the end.
If you can go quickly, that'd be great.
Sure. There's the 4 items that would be in a comprehensive study: establish accurate base conditions on North Broadway, account for other potential area developments, estimate the maximum potential of all the properties in the MFO zone, and analyze in detail the cumulative traffic increases to identify significant adverse impacts and provide for the required mitigating improvements. That type of detailed review is the standard traffic engineering procedure to assess potential traffic impacts of any development or rezoning and would comply with the necessary hard look requirements of seeker. So that's it. I thank you for the extra few seconds.
Sure.
And I'd be
Give
happy.
you a solid 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Eileen?
My name is Eileen Wachs. I am a Village of Irvington resident and a taxpayer. And first of all, I commend the board for doing a comprehensive plan. I think that's very important because we need to address the long-term prospects for the village. And I do agree that the plan has improved. And I also agree that it was a very good decision not to have a commercial district on the properties in question. However, I want to point out that one of my concerns is that whatever is approved And I don't suggest the plan be approved tonight for this reason and other reasons which you'll hear tonight, is that Woodcliff is the last remaining estate visible on the east side of Broadway in accordance with Marissa Marvelli, who's a historic preservation specialist. And Irvington prides itself on maintaining its historic look and its quaint village feel. And the way the comprehensive plan seems to be written, it would allow a building to be built that would obstruct the long view of Woodcliff, which is absolutely outstanding. And I think that it sets a very bad precedent, because here we have an opportunity to optimize the look of Irvington, not only on this property and the other upcoming properties for sale, but in the long run in every way. And I do believe that this is an area of the comprehensive plan that needs to be looked at very carefully, because certainly, and I think it's in the village best interest to maintain, as we say, just like on Main Street, the historic look and feel of the village, a unique river village town. And I do think if a building, even if it is a certain number of feet high, if it visually obstructs the Woodcliff mansion and takes away from the long view that makes the property so beautiful and is another jewel in our village, I do think that would be detrimental and could have other implications, because other developers would be able to do the same thing in other properties that become available. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Oley.
Hello, my name is Eric Oley. I live in Irvington. I was on the comprehensive plan committee that looked ahead into this issue a couple of years ago. I had the pleasure of serving on that committee and looking at all these issues. And I would just like to express my support for the new zoning code as it stands. And I would like to thank the board for the enormous amount of work, thoughtful consideration that they have undertook with regard to this issue. And I just also like to say that I grew up in Irvington and I moved back here with my family. I grew up in Irvington with a dad who ended up becoming president of the Historical Society and the village historian for many years after he retired from teaching and coaching in the schools. And I sometimes unwillingly heard all about Irvington history, all about the buildings. But mostly when I was older, I'd willingly listen to these stories. And I would just like to say that at no point have I ever been to this Maxon property or this estate. And I just think that the benefits that the zoning code give to the future of the village, and looking forward ahead to all the possibilities that these properties can afford for the village, I just think it's really, really important to change the zoning code as it stands right now. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Eric. Karen Schatzel.
My name is Karen Schatzel, and I'm a member of the Irvington Housing Committee and have agreed to read a statement from the committee, the members of which are Deborah Flock, Chet Kerr, Susan Robinson, Tom Thacker, and David Zweigel. Dear Mayor Smith and trustees Gilliland, Kehoe, Lonke, and Silverberg, the Irvington Housing Committee wishes to voice its unanimous support for passage of the May 13, 2021 draft local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district along North Broadway. We believe these last few sizable parcels of land within the village's borders represent a unique opportunity to create multifamily housing, which, due to incentives for the creation of fair and affordable housing, as well as those for the preservation and adaptive reuse of historic structures, will result in development that serves as a model for multifamily housing in similar communities. The Housing Committee appreciates the trustees' efforts in first identifying needs within the village through the comprehensive planning process, which twice identified affordable housing as seriously deficient in the village's housing inventory, a need confirmed by the Westchester County Housing Needs Assessment, which was published in November 2019, and then by taking action to address those needs. We also appreciate the time and effort invested in this process and realize that in attempting to balance the sometimes competing wishes of various stakeholders, compromises had to be reached. We hope that the Board of Trustees will continue to examine Irvington's zoning code for other instances where it might inadvertently preclude the construction of affordable housing. We also look forward to the village's adoption of the most recent NY Stretch Energy Code to ensure that any new or renovated housing built on the parcels subject to this rezoning, or even other areas of the village, is built to the highest environmental standards. Finally, we request that the Board of Trustees examine, as soon as is practical, the feasibility of increasing the fair and affordable housing requirement to 15% from the current 10% for any new housing of 10 units or more to be built in the future within the village boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Dave Osborne.
Hi, this is Dave Osborne. I live at 93 North Broadway, right across the street from, I guess, the Maxon property, just a little bit north of Woodcliff. Not a regular attendee at these meetings. I wanted to thank you, Brian Smith, and the Board of Trustees for taking the time and working out the details of this plan. I know it's challenging and you have to balance a lot of constituencies. I was especially grateful to see these tax numbers, to see what the potential income impact would be on Irvington. We've lived here for 12 years. My wife and I own the house here at 93 North Broadway. We pay the taxes gratefully because we like the town. We've never sent a kid to your schools. My concern, as I voiced the last time I was on this call, is the traffic. And while I respect previous comments, the traffic is a problem already. And all of a sudden you add additional multifamily, the traffic is going to get a lot worse. And, it's certain peak hours of the day, it's wretched, and it will be even more wretched. And I wanted to voice that opinion. Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Dave. Felix?
You guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Hey, Brian.
You're a pro. Come on, Felix.
Well, no, I'm listening on my headset. So anyway, I didn't want to be one of those "you're on mute" people. So the phrase of 2020. You're on mute, yeah. And can you hear me? Anyway, I had a couple things. I'm gonna get to the detailed one first. I know I mentioned this at the last meeting, but after looking at it some more, I would love to see, if possible, for you guys to consider somehow including in the definition of affordable units that are at some multiple of the area median income, so that we're not pricing out of those units, our people that our own village employees, if they don't happen to be hourly or entry level. I met one of our police officers a couple weeks ago, Jessica. She's lovely. She doesn't live in town. I have no idea what her family situation is. Maybe she's single and she qualified, maybe not. I have no idea what she makes. I didn't look it up, but she's the kind of person who I don't really care exactly what her situation is, but to me, we should figure out a way to make those people part of the community. And if we can't do it through specific references to certain types of people, like emergency workers or whatever, because that's no longer permitted, then maybe some fraction of affordable units would qualify, even if they were at some higher multiple of the area median income. I'll stop there. I have something else I want to talk about, but maybe I'll dial back in for that one.
I think we're actually going to talk about what you're proposing in a little while. That's kind of that forgotten middle that I was talking about in the beginning.
Yeah.
It looks like we can actually preference, for the true affordable, you cannot, but for the kind of our own made up definition of what kind of that middle income is, it looks like we can. So we would definitely look to do that as a board. Give bonus points if you worked for the village or worked, were a volunteer fireman or worked for the school district or were a police officer or whatever, like we could work out the actual details, but building in those preferences, which we used to have, back when we first got some affordable housing, true affordable housing, that you can't do that after the settlement with HUD in Westchester County, but we think we can we're pretty sure we know we can, or that for the that middle income or the forgotten middle, which also I think addresses they make too much to qualify for affordable.
Great. Well, that's awesome to hear. I'm pleased. Okay, great. Well, that's like I said, I have something else, but I'm probably out of time, so I'll re-raise and you go on to the next person.
Great. Thanks, Felix. Peter. All right, Peter.
I'm doing well, Mayor Smith. Thank you.
Great.
I wanted to focus on the SECRA declaration and a few implications of it. I did send a letter this morning.
Yeah.
A few implications of it that really apply to the whole zoning itself, not just the inaccuracy, as I'm stating, of the SECRA. In terms of the questions 17 and 18, which are consistency with the community plans and the consistency with the community character. So in both cases, the village decided to say that the new zoning was consistent with those two things. And they gave as explanations in part 3, reasons that are just factually false. They said that the zoning of the large lot, they said that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, which is the criterion for that consistency, and quoted that in the comprehensive plan, the goal of the large lots should be amended to reflect the current and historic uses of these properties. That is, the large lots themselves. The MFO zone does not do that. Those properties contain single-family attached houses. Historically, they did, and currently they still do. And they've never included multifamily uses. So MFO changes that around. It is inconsistent with the current historical uses of those properties, and therefore it's inconsistent with a comprehensive plan. That's just a fact. Second is the principal goal of the Broadway Corridor Working Group was to have the corridor, this is a quote, to have the Broadway corridor remain much as it is now in appearance. Now, this points out to me something that really, I think, gets lost in all of the discussions that the board has had and a lot of these public hearings, which is just of the use. People say affordable housing, wonderful, multifamily, wonderful. But the sheer size that MFO is allowing makes it certain that with development for the MFO, the Broadway corridor will not even remotely look as it does now in appearance. I showed some drawings of the Maxon development, but it should be clear that the Carafiello lot could have double the square footage of the Maxon development that I showed. And if there were an assemblage of the 3 properties other than Maxon, it could have even more than that. And it would end up to have footprints at 3 stories high equal to 6 Main Street schools. So I don't think anyone could ever say that development of that density and that bulk on those properties along the Broadway property would allow it to look as it does now in appearance, which is the exact criterion, the principal goal of the Broadway Corridor Working Group and the comprehensive plan?
We're at about 3:30, so if you can wrap it up for now, you can always come back.
Okay, so the other quickly then, the comprehensive plan also says that if the property were redeveloped as single-family residential, the open space and existing topography would be greatly compromised. And that was quoted in the SECRA declaration or determination. But in fact, the allowable coverage is more than 2.5 times under this zoning what it would be a single-family residential. So it would compromise the existing open space 2.5 times as much. All right, I will ask to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. David Gordon.
Good evening. My name is David Gordon, and I'm an attorney representing the neighbors of the project. I'll be as brief as possible. I know you've got a lot of speakers and probably a long evening ahead of you. The first thing I want to mention to the board is that earlier today, a petition was submitted to you against the draft law, which is a little bit different than some of the other petitions that you've seen. It's a formal petition under state law, under section, I think it's 7-708 of the village law, that allows neighbors and certain other people of a proposed zoning amendment to protest, issue a formal protest. And if they get enough people, that requires the board to require a supermajority in order to pass the law. The pertinent number of people that's necessary to require that supermajority is 20% of owners of 20% of the land directly across the road from the rezoned property, up to 100 feet in from the road. With the petition, there was a map, a small map of the area with the lots marked off, making it very, very clear that there's well more than 20%, owners of 20% of the land, well more than a majority. In fact, it's very, very close to unanimous along North Broadway and Strawberry Lane. That was provided in hard copy and emailed today to the village, and also to the by email to the village attorney. What that means very briefly is two things. One, earlier in the evening, the mayor mentioned that you were trying to figure out what the community would like in developing this legislation. And in particular, the mayor mentioned Strawberry Lane. Well, it's very clear what the community would like. And at this point, what they would like is not to have the proposed amendment. The second thing, again, is that under village law, under New York state law, you're now required to have a supermajority in order to pass the amendment. So I wanted to start off by mentioning that, and it may not be a common occurrence for you, but I want to get that out there and make sure that everybody's aware of it.
Okay.
Just moving forward, I don't want to mention a lot of the information that against the project has already been brought out to you. The 2 points I would make is that there's been a lot of testimony, and frankly, it's also fairly obvious about the potential environmental impacts. Here we're talking in particular about traffic. North Broadway is already at times congested. This would clearly increase that. And secondly, the historic issues are significant. This is an old manor that was occupied by the Morgan family. It's beautiful. It is part of the character of the village, the North Broadway corridor. This would clearly change that. You've got an architectural rendering that's been sent to you that demonstrates that that a building built pursuant to this zoning can block completely the manor house from the view on Broadway. So I just want to lay those out to you. These are clearly substantial environmental impacts.
You're about 3:30 in, so.
Okay, very quickly, Mayor, just very quickly then. The second thing is that in addition to arguably hurting the village, you're also arguably not complying with seeker. With respect to traffic, you've basically said we're going to look at that later. There's a number of reasons why that's inappropriate. I can go through those, but I understand time is running short. You need to look at the traffic now, the potential traffic, and also the historic preservation. Your draft neg deck says that this is going to improve the aesthetics and the historic. That's clearly not true, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others. So that's just the real overview, and I can answer any questions, but I do want to, I appreciate the time, and I do want to allow others to have their say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe Alex Hernandez is the next new speaker. Let me go back to Felix Lurie after that, assuming no one else raises their hand. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Mayor Smith. So again, I've been to these meetings a couple of times, and I did write a letter back in February of 2020, commenting on some of the inconsistencies of the zoning with the comprehensive plan. And in order to be brief, I just want to reiterate what Peter Pideri has mentioned, that the principal goal of the Broadway Corridor Working Group was that the Broadway Corridor remain much as it is now in appearance. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the briefness. Dave Gaucho.
Thank you for the floor, Mayor Smith. Again, I appreciate your efforts. I know it's a difficult task. I just wanted to reiterate that my family and I are against the rezoning, and we think you should vote against it. I'm in agreement with Peter on a number of issues, but the potential density of full development is out of scale and out of character with the village. I really doubt that a massive increase in traffic that full development would bring can be mitigated. This will degrade the quality of life in the village. And the way I feel about it is if you zone for it, you're going to get it. And again, Peter has made some compelling arguments in regard to the amount of affordable housing in Irvington that doesn't necessarily show up in the Westchester County reports. So I think that's worth looking at. And just one last thing, I have a question because you would see it from your perspectives. Are the majority of Irvington citizens who have engaged in this process, are they for it or against it?
I'd say the majority we haven't heard from at all, but the vast majority. But there's, I'd say that there's a healthy mix on both sides.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Francis Gowdy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and trustees.
Francis.
As you may recall, I was on the subcommittee that reviewed North Broadway rezoning. The findings of that subcommittee were far from unanimous. The current 1 acre, which was previously half acre during your tenure, I believe, Brian, unless I'm mistaken.
Correct.
Is not out of character with the village. So were you to revert to the half acre that was previously here, I'd like to see the analysis on the taxes. I'll bet apples and oranges. You'd be looking at a comparable situation with your very best projections of multifamily, and you'd probably get a revenue neutral situation. I'm kind of dismayed when I see experts like Mr. Mafia and Ms. Marvelli kind of disregarded. I think the process, yourself, Brian, seemed to be in favor of it, and the village attorney very obviously is in favor of it. And I think the response to the SECRA was disingenuous at best. And I'd like to see a more even-handed approach by the village government on this. Now, clearly, you've pounded away at this for 2 years because you want it, but a lot of us don't. 156 units on an area that you admit is steep slopes and unbuildable. This just on the heels of a pandemic where we're all trying to avoid crowding. People aren't taking trains, people aren't taking buses, restaurants are spaced out. It's for you to densify zoning after what we've all been through in the past 16 or 18 months is, I think, kind of tone deaf. And it's just occurred to me that since Brightview, which seemed to be pushed also from within the village government, since Brightview, right through this effort here, the sole beneficiary of the effort would be the property owners. The dense traffic, the density of population, the obscuring of historic properties. These are all minus, 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 minus. And the only person who gets a plus that I can see is the property owner who you hand a big bonus to. You say, guess what? Your property is worth 3 times what it was, or 4 times, or 5 times, or maybe 10 times what it was. And to touch on the last speaker's point.
And you're just a little over 3 minutes, so if you can try to wrap it up, Francis.
All right. Yeah, I know you don't want to hear too much more, but
you can always come back.
The Mr. Gaucho's point about properly counting what affordable housing is here. I maintain affordable housing for 4 families here in the village, and I have for a long time. And they've been of every stripe. I mean, I've had, Hispanic people, Black people, lesbians. There's only one color that matters to the landlord, and it's green. And there are a lot of us here who just don't give a darn about all this other stuff, and we just treat people as people and don't try to pigeonhole them. And I don't presume that anybody of any stripe cannot afford to live in Irvington. It's just a matter of where do you want to live and how hard do you want to work in order to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Frank Bilbao. Sorry if I butchered that.
Hey, Brian, it's Palavio.
I should have gotten it. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Brian, so a few things. I don't know the gentleman that spoke, the traffic engineer that spoke earlier. Mm-hmm. I'm a former licensed professional engineer myself. And I practiced at Parsons Brinkerhoff for quite a bit. When I hear this many people complaining about the traffic, it made me actually look into the hourly traffic data on the New York State DOT website that AKRF references on the site. So I wrote a note, passed the deadline about it, read it. If you have questions about it, please call me, but pay attention to this. That data, AKRF will be the first ones to admit, that's a very back of the envelope type high level study. That's based on 2017 traffic data, counted at 140 feet north of Strawberry Lane, projected to 2019. It does not account for all the traffic that never went past that traffic counterpoint on Strawberry Lane. So any traffic coming in and out of the schools from Harriman, up and down Main Street, off of Riverview Road, none of that was counted. Okay, so that's not a true traffic study. I'll leave my comment there on that part, but really I beg you, pay attention to what I wrote and what the other gentleman wrote, because there's something really there for you to pay attention to on that. Just the other issues on the AKRF study, table 4, they should really redo table 4, but do it for Irvington multifamily complexes. Not complexes in Bronxville and Pelham, and not new construction, okay? They should do it for a mature construction, okay? And it's related to the traffic study, because the traffic study didn't account for a growth rate over the next 20 years. And you know what? People move into affordable housing without families. They have families. They have more than one kid. Then they get cars. Their kids get cars. Right? So none of that. You seem to be reliant on that AKRF study. That is a really, really very preliminary study to look at. Do the traffic study, do the right estimates on getting a projection in Irvington. And last, Brian, look, it's not about school capacity. It's not about that, because we all know, Brian, that if it were about school capacity, the school would be totally over budgeted right now by 300 students. That's almost 23 students per class. It's about, can Irvington provide the quality of education with the, with the tax revenue that those properties would bring in. So Larry, thanks for presenting the revenue, but you didn't present the cost end. Okay, you presented the revenue end. And by the way, did your numbers even include the school district tax? I don't know.
It was all in.
Okay, yeah, but you got to now finish the picture. You did the income part, provide the cost part. Okay, and will these properties pull in more revenue for the village than what it's costing us? Yes, affordable housing, but it's got to be at
We're about 3:30 if you could try to wrap it up.
That's right. But it's, yes, affordable housing, but it's got to be at less traffic or the same traffic, not more traffic, and it's got to be at the same quality education for our kids without increasing the taxes on the existing base. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Boris Rubenstein.
This is both Boris Rubenstein and Halina Rubenstein. We're working on the same computer. Can we? Okay. Thank you very much to you, Brian, and to the board for spending 2 years looking at this issue. But as any good tailor and any good carpenter knows, you measure 3 times, you cut only once. And as I hear people talk and as I see the studies that you have, I don't think that we've measured enough to actually do the cut, because whatever we cut is going to be lasting for the next 20, 30 years. I see 3 very serious issues. One is the sale of Maxon. And I think that the owners of Maxon deserve to sell their property. And that is fine. I have no issue with that. The issue of affordable housing, I have no problems with affordable housing. And if we need to have more affordable housing, that would be fine. And this is has nothing to do with has nothing to do with not wanting diversity in the village. We have 3 strikes. Both my wife and I are immigrants. We're both Mexican, and we also Jewish. So we have the 3 strikes. So we do want diversity in here, but I'm concerned hearing the studies and hearing what people are saying. I'm concerned about the density of the project as it stands now, the traffic impact that this is going to have on us, the massive buildup that is going to be right at our door, and I'm worried that the quality of life in Irvington will degrade. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I add something? Do I have just
You have
a minute?
You have another minute, and I'll even give you a minute and a half. How's that?
Thank you. So thank you again for letting us voice our opinions. I'm totally behind all of those who, for one reason or another, are opposing the development, because we live just across the street. I will reiterate, we are not against affordable housing. We are not against developing the property. We are against the impact of that kind of density that you are proposing. And I really feel that whatever we are saying, it's really falling on deaf ears. I really don't see a positive response from the board. And I don't know why it is. Maybe it's my personal sensitivities, but I have felt that in the last few meetings that I have attended. I really think that this is the wrong time to make such a decision as the one you are trying to make at this point. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. The housing market has been inflated to the max. It's really artificially, the market value has been artificially inflated because of our conditions. And I really think that you are trying to make a decision at a time where it's really not the best time to make it. And I would really, request that you think about postponing this decision. I really don't feel that this is the right time.
Okay,
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Michael Hanna.
Hi.
Hello.
So thank you again for the work that the village has been doing on this front. I just wanted to share 2 points sort of based on what I was hearing tonight. Starting by that, I've just kind of been tickled by the image shared by some residents that makes it appear that, a Stop and Shop is going to be built imminently on the property. And I say that coming from someone who lives in a multi-family housing property. And so the idea that it's unpleasant or a health concern because of our shared experience of this pandemic, I think is not necessarily the case. On our property and neighboring properties, I've found that in fact, because of the beauty and the walkability, we have people walking, coming sort of as a destination to walk alongside the sidewalks of, the property, the sidewalks that run along our property. So it's actually been a refuge for many people during the pandemic, a place that they can go and relax. And we're not a park, and please don't walk around our properties, but it's certainly, alongside the property on those public sidewalks that people seem to love it. The other point I would make is that, I think the majority of our residents have a single car. In our personal case, we have 2 teens who have gotten their licenses and appear to be driving very safely. And so for a year and a half, we have an additional car, but they're graduating and we'll be back down to 1 car at the end of the summer. And similarly, our kids won't be students in the district while we will continue to live here for a very long time. So I think, we have to take things in stride that, sometimes there'll be somewhat more of an impact and other times less. But over the grand scheme of things, a multifamily property can be a very welcoming and attractive place and welcoming place. And also one that, there won't always be, there won't necessarily be folks, as we see in our local property, that have the very large number of cars that was being cited. So thank you, and I appreciate the work. And I know that you have a lot of different considerations you're making, but I think you're very close on what you've arrived at, and look forward to seeing you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Our old colleague, Kristen Wall.
Unmute. There we go. Good evening, board. Can you hear me?
We can. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys doing?
Good.
I would just like to say that I am all for increasing Irvington's affordable housing stock as long as it's implemented without destroying the current residents' quality of life, while significantly enriching specific landowners. Which to me begs the question, how do we know that this amendment survives a spot zoning challenge? Just quick define spot zoning as from New York. Spot zoning has been defined as the process of singling out a small parcel of land for use classification totally different from that of the surrounding area for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of the other owners. Sometimes I guess the test for spot zoning is whether the change results from a well-considered plan calculated to serve the general welfare of the community. And I think that's what so many people have come to the board tonight to discuss is it seems like there's nothing for us in this. It's not that we don't want affordable housing. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to rezone to increase affordable housing stock. And as a resident, I get nothing out of having increased density in that particular corridor. So that was one of my questions. Another thing I heard tonight is you mentioned you haven't heard from the majority, haven't heard, I guess, from a lot of people. And I think during COVID, maybe this isn't the time to pass such sweeping legislation or an amendment on rezoning the village. We don't even know what the world is going to look like after this. We don't even know how Mr. DiNardo's project is going to come out. There are so many factors we don't have the answer to right now. I feel like it's a shame because I know you've worked on it for 2 years, but I don't think we should ram it through just because we worked hard on it. It just might not be a good idea right now. And I did want to go back 1 second also to the DiNardo property. I recall when I was on the board, we allowed Mr. DiNardo additional density because, and this is what we based our decision on, was because it was the last multifamily parcel in Irvington. But we didn't think about, oh, we're just going to rezone some other parcels when we made that decision. And I think that's because at the time, 3 of us, Connie, Mark, and Brian, we on the board know that we have a 2 square mile town. It's a small, small village. We are built out. Again, doesn't mean we can't do some affordable housing somewhere, but if we rezone, we open the door to the developers to push us around. We have no leverage. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well. Jonathan Casilli, sorry.
No problem, Board. Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Good evening. I live at 75 North Broadway and have talked to you guys the last couple months. Appreciate it. So tonight, a lot of this sounds pretty consistent to me, and it's been kind of what has been my issue since we first started, was kind of the background and the research needed minimally in order to make such a massive decision where you're going to rezone property to something that's going to could be as big as 156 units with a bunch of asphalt as well for parking and excavation and all of these other components that are going to go into whatever gets developed up there. So I'm still opposed to this because it doesn't seem, from the study that Larry had posted online, and thank you, Larry, for sending that, it didn't seem like there was a fully fleshed out, fully researched, comprehensive study done on the traffic impact. There wasn't any suggested fixes for the added load of traffic, and seemingly also if that other person was correct earlier on the call, didn't project out for the future, which is extremely important when making a decision like this, in my opinion. I'm all for multifamily, all for affordable housing everywhere around Irvington. I think that it could be very helpful to round out our community, as Mr. Hanna has said. I think one of the issues around here is the absence of the sidewalk on the east end of the road, and then also just the sheer amount of volume that passes by here. So I think I would urge the board to, and I appreciate all the time that you guys have put together in research and hard work and all of that, and to come to us and just kind of just hear all the negatives, it's got to suck, it's got to sting a bit. But my angle really is just about trying to figure out as much as we can before we make a big decision like this. So I would urge the board to take that next step further, hire that traffic person, get more of a rounded out presentation, and then see where people are at. I mean, I think you're going to get everyone against kind of these lighter researched reports, right? When you have holes in these reports, this is why in development you really get these ironclad engineers to come in and parcel up a product that's just can't be penetrated. So I'm just asking that the board delay this and urge that you consider doing further research to the traffic study, which I think is going to affect more people in Irvington than the people that are going to move into these new units. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Al Milo.
Hello.
Hey, how are you, Rita?
This is not Al. This is Rita.
Your voice
Okay.
changed, Al. Thanks for calling, Rita.
I'm going to go as quickly as possible. I am against this, first of all, but one of the things that wasn't mentioned, you said the main groups in town that are important for this is the fire department, the police department. You didn't mention the ambulance corps. That's an important part too. Again, with the increased population in Irvington, a lot more people in there. That's a lot more work for the ambulance corps. I don't know if you've spoken to them and gotten them involved with this. Okay, that's just one point. The quaint village, the historic quality of the town that we all love, putting in an area right when you come into town, huge units, totally would change the whole area that we live in and that we love very much. And we've been here for 36 years. Don't want to move. Don't want to move. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Okay, the 3 o'clock traffic. Okay, so we're talking about the traffic and how terrible. No one I know that goes out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. From 3 to 4:30, you don't go out because you can't, because you're stuck in traffic. I tried to get down Main Street and it took me 20 minutes one day. 3 to 4, I don't know where they're coming from. I don't think they're necessarily Irvington. They're people coming through Irvington on Broadway. That's where the main traffic is. And of course, going down Main Street. But if that traffic is like that now, what's it going to be like with another group of 156 units in one block area in the middle of Broadway? So for those many reasons, I too wish you would please wait on this. It would be great if we could have meetings about this in town with as many people as would like to come, a bigger place than we have for the meetings now, so that everyone could get their 2 cents in. And that's all. That's it for me. Thanks, folks.
Thank you very much, Rita. Adi Bloom.
Hi, everyone. First, thanks for all the efforts of the board. To start, as others have said, I'm all for progress. I'm all for affordable housing. I'm all for diversity. As I think everyone on all sides of this issue can agree, Irvington's a special place. We moved here for the village's character, which I think many believe is unique in Westchester. But it's tenuous, and we're nestled between a lot of development in neighboring towns, and it wouldn't take much for Irvington's special character to be lost and to precipitate a downward spiral. So where I come from is just trying to think about this in terms of moderation. The proposed density, it's totally out of character, and I fear for all of the knock-on effects. The density is going to impact the whole town, not just those of us who live around Maxon, because everyone must find their way through the North Broadway corridor, and it's already bad enough with school traffic and other traffic that accumulates there. So I remain very concerned about the impact on traffic and safety. As I mentioned last time, my brother-in-law got in a wreck coming out of Riverview. It's already not very safe, and also the impact on student and teacher ratios and quality of education. So, however, it strikes me that a more agreeable solution isn't too far out of reach. I think a lot of progress has been made on getting to a point that a lot of people in town could be comfortable with, and I think that starts with a moderated density, or a study to if affordable housing is the driver, doing a study to find the best place for affordable housing in Irvington. So I just want to. This is a change we can't take back, and I really hope the extra time is taken to come up with the right solution that isn't going to leave an indelible stain on the community. But again, really appreciate everyone's efforts on this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you attending and speaking up. Glenn Cashin. Hello, Glenn.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and
All
clear,
right,
Glenn.
thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm no stranger to this process, as I've been here a few times, and as I've said, well, first, I'm Glenn Cashin, 81 North Broadway. I'm right across the street from the subject properties, and I am opposed to the zoning change. I think, I'm hearing a lot of, that a lot of people like presuppose what these properties will be. And I don't think we actually know what they'll be, other than within the context of what the proposed rezoning is and the specific bonuses offered, et cetera. Has a developer indicated that they are interested? Do you guys know?
Not that we're aware of.
Oh, okay. So, I'm not really seeing this vote as a vote on affordable housing. I know a lot of people are speaking up on affordable housing tonight. I think basically, it's a vote to allow the property owner to sell at a premium. And that is definitely at the expense of the community. I think, the density, the scale, people who speak from their perspectives. Half Moon, I lived in Half Moon for a little while before I moved into my home. 120, 140, we're not talking about the scale of Half Moon and 120, 140. This is what's being proposed in this rezoning is far more dense at its extreme end. Really, we're talking here about, if the goal is maintaining a view shed at the expense of the actual quality of life, by increasing the population by something 6%, if you do the math, 256, maybe 3 people per, I don't know, you average it out, whatever it is, 6, 8, 10, of increasing the population of the whole village, but concentrating that increase on this small strip of public road, a thoroughfare that's North Broadway. It just seems wrong to burden this one area with such an incredible increase in population, with all of the things that concerned residents and experts have been talking about. I joined late. I haven't heard all the comments, but what I've heard, there's a lot of concern. So I urge the board to vote no, or to at least delay the vote until some of the more nuanced details can be worked out. We understand what exactly this is going to be and who the beneficiaries are in this process. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak out against this.
It was almost exactly 3 minutes, so well done, Glenn.
Oh, thank you. I timed it to perfection.
You were practicing all day. Thanks very
all
much.
day. That's right. All right, Brian. Thanks.
Thanks. Have a good night. Kim Raby.
Hello. Hi, Brian. Hi,
How are you?
Thanks. Thanks again for occupying my Mondays. So great. I want to just call your attention to pages 37, 38 of the agenda. In my former life, I was a consultant, so we like to get very data driven and when we analyze the facts. And my neighbors and I, we wanted to write to you about the current proposal as is, which, as we're all aware, has evolved significantly over the past 2 years. And each amendment of that proposal has challenged, even our neighbors that have been so involved to understand the size and density of potential developments. But to those that are interested, but maybe less involved, it's really almost been impossible to understand them. And I guess I just want to reiterate what some of my neighbors have talked about. The question for us is really around density. It's not necessarily about the uses, whether it's senior, affordable, or market rate. It's really about that density. So we put together some charts just to illustrate how the allowable developments have changed since it was NBMD now to the current MFO. We have been outspoken about our opposition all along the way, related to allowable size and unit density of the developments and how these would harm the North Irvington environment and how they may affect Irvington services. I would agree with Boris and Helena. Recently, I really don't feel, I feel like our objections have not been heard related to size and density. Every single proposal that's been published since MB&D has resulted in a larger and denser allowable development. You can see some of these charts that the maximum building coverage has increased from what existing conditions are today to what would be allowable. 257%, max floor area increased 243%. And just looking at the number of dwelling units across the properties, when it was MBMD, we were very much focused on commercial uses, and thank you, you did remove those. But the allowable number of dwelling units has increased 80% over the past, what we're looking at now, year and a half. So we really just wanted to wrap some numbers around some of our opposition and really ask you to reconsider that density factor. And that's all I had for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for all of your input for the last 2 years. Back to Felix Lurie now.
Hello, thank you. Yes, I have two things. The first thing I just forgot earlier, I was going to ask Larry, this tax analysis is great. Just a question on the affordable housing one. Does this include some kind of assumption around, tax abatements or whatever, benefits affordable housing buildings typically get? Or does it assume they're sort of day one full taxpayers?
Day one full taxpayers, but based upon the rent roll, which is obviously reduced compared to market rate.
All right, I apologize. I'm going to show my ignorance here. So this is, is that another way of saying it's inclusive of whatever tax benefits they get because it's reduced for those benefits, or does it assume that they are full taxpayers on units that are worth less because the rent is less, meaning
the latter.
If they pay taxes they wouldn't actually pay?
The latter, I believe what you outlined is the latter one is correct. It's the assessment would be less because the rent roll is less just by definition. So those were the assumptions that was used. That's not assuming any sort of, deal or pilot, payment in lieu of tax agreement or any abatement that might happen by a board. Doesn't assume any of that.
I see. Okay, so there is, all right, I got it. That's helpful. Thank you. So there's those numbers are, if there's a number to quibble with, it might be that one because that one might be too optimistic. The other ones, I'm looking at these assumptions. I assume market rate units don't get, I don't know if they get tax abatements or not. I guess I should ask the same question. Do market units also get tax breaks typically or no?
I'm not sure how to answer that. Affordable units don't necessarily get tax abatements or tax breaks. It's just that their assessment is less because they bring in less income.
I see. I maybe just be wrong. I vaguely recall from my professional life that typically when you build affordable housing, you get tax credits, and that's what I'm thinking of. But
right.
Maybe
that's not associated with property taxes. That's a federal level tax credit.
I see.
Income tax credit. So not in our control.
Got it. Okay, that's great. Okay,
right.
Thank you. All right, so I appreciate that clearing up the confusion. That's one. The other thing I was going to mention too, and this is a little out of place at this meeting, given I think the discussion has been very respectful and focused on the real issues, which I think are, and a lot of valid points have been raised. I just thought, for the record, I wanted to mention there were some comments made at the last meeting. One I heard about, people should only mix with their own kind of people. I'm not really sure what that means, but I disagree with that. Regardless of where you stand on this issue, I certainly don't know what my kind of people is.
I'm a Boston sports fan in New York, so maybe I have no people, but that's something I think, regardless of where you stand, I don't think should be a consideration. And then I did hear some comments that suggested, people who are opposed to the project, that they're elitist or racist. I also think that's not helpful or fair. I think, people, I have a lot of sympathy for my neighbors who live in or around the area who I think have some real valid concerns. And I don't think that they're, landed aristocracy trying to keep out the peasants. I think, again, people moved here probably for reasons, including lack of density and quiet space, quiet open space. I think that's all valid. So I appreciate that the dialogue tonight has been focused on those issues without any kind of the ad hominem attacks, I think, coming from either side. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Felix. Looks like LGV 20. If you could give us your full name, please.
Ellen Silverstein. And my phone isn't I'm on a cell phone and it's been going in and out. I didn't have good reception.
Okay.
So I hope that this will go through, but I hope to be less than 3 minutes. Because I agree with a lot of the things that have been said by the last 4, 5, or 6 people. So I nearly have to say I agree with them. The density issue boggles my mind, to be honest. I can't even think that you would be considering that. So hopefully you will reconsider that. I'm still for having affordable housing. I don't know that this is the proper place if it has to.
Looks like she lost her cell coverage again. We can put her back on if she comes back on. At least we know who it is now. Let's go on to Taylor Palmer.
Good evening, Mayor Smith, members of the board. Good evening. For the record, my name is Taylor Palmer. I'm a partner with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the owners of the Maxon property, who are also joining us again this evening. Tonight, as usual, I am joined by my planning consultant and our team's planning consultant, Dave Smith of Planning Development Advisors. Additionally, as Mayor Smith mentioned, I wasn't going to say too much, but I wanted to make sure to address some comments that were presented this evening. It seems as though there's some misconceptions, or we might say misinformation, in the community outside of this public forum about what the village is actually considering this evening, which is a local law to create a multifamily office district that involves lots that are, for the most part, already improved by existing non-conforming uses. For example, there were comments this evening about traffic impacts, community character. The law includes specific requirements for development proposal to preserve buildings on the premises, proposing to try and preserve buildings on the premises and adaptively reuse them. It incentivizes that, where they could otherwise be demolished, period. Equally, from the proposed law and seeker on its own, for any project that's to come before this board, if or whenever one is proposed, it would be fully evaluated under seeker in the village's code that's being developed for this local law. We've also had a chance to review some of the comments that were posted on the meeting agenda. Other than the comments that were in support of the zoning change, many of the remaining comments were those that this board has generally addressed over the last 2 years of hearings. Much like the comments received at the last meeting, these comments and some of the comments tonight just seem driven to keep the process open indefinitely. This is the throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks approach. Add setbacks, increase the setbacks, reduce the uses, do it somewhere else. But the board has had this spaghetti before and the gravy, and they reviewed these items at length over the last 2 or 3 years. These comments are designed to make these properties economically unviable to develop or to adaptively reuse and to preserve buildings like the one on the Maxon property. But this method is not the standard review here. It's just generalized community opposition, or what we call banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, period. To that end, on behalf of the Maxon property, respectfully request that this board consider closing the hearing on the law and the board consider rendering a negative declaration of significance under seeker, which would be the third negative declaration regarding the evolution of this law. Maxon's involvement in the review of this law was to provide additional support and studies and materials for Mr. Smith and Ms. Jane Chill that shows that the law and the zoning that's proposed is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And it's to help this board and those in the public who are reviewing it to take this hard look under seeker and review and regarding all the potentially significant environmental impacts. As we've noted, we believe that the village has taken a hard look as 2 prior negative declarations have been rendered on the expanded versions of the law. And further, the board has the information it needs to make these reasoned determinations, hiring consultants to provide that information again, which has been further supplemented by members of the public and of course the Maxon team. We previously highlighted that any further delay in adopting this law will only continue to negatively impact our client's ability to develop or market the property for an economically viable tax rateable use on this property and keep the property on the tax rolls, making it feasible to maintain buildings like the mansion building on the Maxon property. If the board, indeed, as the board noted again tonight, and the village attorney has mentioned previously, any project in this district will be subject to its own secret review and the code regulations in the future, with public hearings and more input from the public. So again, we appreciate this opportunity to speak this evening and working with you over the last few years into those comments of the public. But we'd ask that this board consider making a determination this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get Ellen back up, Larry. Hey, Ellen.
Okay. I want to mention something about a situation that happened in 1975 with the schools when they decided in June that they could cut 2 kindergarten classes because there was going to be a different population. And PS came September, first day of school, they had 28 children or more in the kindergarten classes because the projection had been incorrect, although it was a study. So I just want to make you aware here from these meetings, they could be a lot more. The traffic situation, I live in Highgate, which is Sycamore and Dogwood, and we experience sometimes the traffic is bad.
We lost her again.
It looks like Highgate doesn't have good internet. Let's go to Stefana Fable until Ellen gets back.
Hi, this is Stephanie Fable. I'm at 11 Strawberry Lane and I'm against the rezoning and want you to vote no. And the reason is that the buildings that are proposed are out of scale with their surroundings and with Irvington as a whole. Even within the comprehensive plan, it was quoted that the developments into the MFO would, it would harm the small town open space character that has made Irvington the unique, desirable place it is to live, work, and play. The MFO works against the long-term interests of the current Irvington residents. Not only because you're changing what Irvington is known for with the North Broadway character, but also because of the increased traffic that this is going to, that's going to happen because of this. And I think what we should be doing is not detracting from Irvington's assets, its historical assets, and we shouldn't be worsening, already traffic, all traffic problems we already have. So for those reasons, as well as what everybody else had said on the call, I am against the rezoning. And I think I may still have a little bit of time, but I also wanted to quote what our Westchester County Executive, George Latimer, said in an interview in November 21st, 2019 in the Journal News. He said that we're going to make an honest effort to try to do as much affordable housing as we can, but we want it to fit into the environment. We're not looking to have a project built or a building built in an immediate area that doesn't look like it belongs there in size, scope, and design. And this proposal it does not fit in size, scope, or design. So it goes against what you had said in the comprehensive plan in the beginning, and it also goes against what the county executive said. So please, think about the current residents that are living there, not any upcoming future residents, and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody new?
Ellen's, no, I'm not sure.
Ellen dropped off, right?
I think so.
Yeah, let's go with Samir Vasudev. Hopefully I didn't say that too incorrectly.
All right. Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to say, Brian, thanks for the synopsis in the beginning of this. It helps put things a little bit in perspective on kind of the history of the dialogue. I'm still having a hard time understanding really why we're having this whole dialogue. I look at and I'm hearing everyone talking. There seems to be a plethora of reasons against it. You can argue the validity of those reasons, but it could be traffic, aesthetics, potential taxes, whatever it may be. There's a lot of reasons against it. And I see, what are the reasons for it, right? So one, which is clear and nobody's really talking about, is maximizing tax revenues, not being revenue neutral, maximizing tax revenues so that the burden on the residents, and I think we should all be thinking about what's the benefit of the residents, is lowered. Clearly, nobody's talking about that. We're only talking about neutral revenue situation. So the other benefit that we're looking into seems like diversity. Everybody talks about affordable housing, but I don't think we think of affordable housing as the end game. It's affordable housing and increasing diversity. The end game is diversity. And what seems clear is that when it comes to affordable housing, the town has a decent amount of affordable housing, but that's not necessarily attracting diversity. So what do we need to do to attract diversity? As a person of color, speaking as a person of color, what attracts diversity is a town that shows an acceptance and openness to diversity. We came, my wife and I, who's an immigrant, came to this town 11 years ago because it felt like an open town for diversity. People were open to other cultures. I'm a little bit disappointed, particularly this month, on our town's lack of openness to diversity. It seems like other towns in the area have embraced Pride Month more than we have. Clearly earlier, and I didn't even know about this, it seems we're a little bit disrespectful to Juneteenth. I know for sure that we don't celebrate diversity in other cultures in this town. We don't have, as far as I know, we don't have a Chinese New Year celebration. We don't have Eid. We don't have Diwali. We don't have the diversity that we actually have in this town celebrated. So why would anybody that's diverse want to come into this town? Just because we're creating affordable housing? Well, we have affordable housing. That's not creating the diversity. And so I think we need to refocus this whole dialogue on what is the end game of this zoning. If we do nothing, what's the risk? Is the risk that the properties can't sell for the highest price to single family homes, and therefore we'll have nonprofits, which will reduce the tax burden? Well, okay, that's a risk. So now we need to rezone to address that. Is the risk that, that I guess that's the only risk for not rezoning. If we're not concerned about the properties going to a nonprofit and reducing and eliminating all taxes, which will be a burden to the town, then we shouldn't consider rezoning at all. If we're trying to solve for diversity, then we should look at what creates diversity. Affordable housing is not it. If we're trying to maximize the tax revenues, then the zoning should be all related to maximizing tax revenues while reducing the burden to the town, which is potentially traffic, other services, what have you, all these other sort of things. I just feel like this dialogue has gone really sideways. It's gone for a long time. So I appreciate all the time that everybody's put into it. And this concept of affordable housing for affordable housing's sake is not really what anybody's talking about. We're talking about affordable housing to increase diversity. And that is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's not working.
Okay, thank you. I think Tracy Calvin is a new one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm Tracy Calvin, and I live at 99 Brace Bridge in the northern part of Irvington between Meadowbrook and Sunnyside. And I moved here because of the character of the town, as many others did. And I moved north because of the continued belief in the character of this town. And I respect that you've been going through a thorough process. And I understand that traffic and affordable housing issues have been evaluated and analyzed in an ongoing manner. I am concerned about the fact that I don't hear an integrative urban design process as a part of this questioning. And what I see is that we're going through a zoning and developer-driven questioning about the size and density rather than having an integrative process that is visual for those residents so that we can see what this might look like. And I know that the residents have put together their own floor area ratio drawings and they're shocking. But I think density should be really related to how do we feel when we walk down this street. This street, North Broadway, is in a very compromised situation. It's half highway and it's half potentially a pedestrian experience. It's very, very hard to walk there. If we increase the density, we would have less likelihood of walking in this area and it would not be considered part of the village. We have the opportunity to make this a part of the village. And I believe that the process of incorporating urban design professionals is incredibly important here because this is has such a large impact on the future of the village. So I guess my summary is that I oppose this rezoning effort. And I believe that the reason for my opposition is primarily because I don't see an integrative urban design process that we continue to talk about numbers, we continue to talk about economic gain, loss, et cetera. And those are two things that are not going to answer our questions about being pedestrians here and being residents who care about the character and the continued character of this village. And I do ask you a question. And I shouldn't be presumptuous because I haven't been a part of this. Has an urban designer been a part of this process since the beginning? And if so, I take back some of my criticism. I'd like to hear about that.
Okay, well, we can address that when we address all the other questions because we have a lot to get through.
Okay.
But yeah, the short answer is during the comprehensive plan. That's kind of the idea of a comprehensive plan is just in the face of it, it's comprehensive. So that's part of the answer.
So the drawings and the pictures and the walkthrough of that at the street level for all of us throughout this discussion, to me, would be an integrated urban design process.
Which a lot of that would happen when there was an actual proposal, but we talk about that. We talk about that some more later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think Arlene actually spoke during this portion. So Arlene can go next.
Thanks, Brian. I just wanted to clarify that this, the zoning, the rezoning is not about affordable housing. So I think any discussion, sort of around the goals of affordable housing or not, I think we're talking about in this sort of zoning possibility is like 10 or 15%. So, I think there are many, many of us in the village that are proponents and are really in favor of affordable housing. But I think what you guys are trying to do is sort of rezone a property. So I don't, I agree with, I think what maybe two speakers about sort of diversity and true efforts at diversity, but I don't think those two things should be conflated because this is not about 100% truly affordable housing zoning. So I don't think those two things should be confused. And I do think that the village should continue to look at every opportunity to increase affordable housing in the village over time, because I think it is really important and that all of us in Westchester have to do our part, not just believe that that should be done somewhere else or believe in it as a concept, but not in my backyard. So anyways, I that's all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you. I think these were all repeats. So let's go with Stefan Mafia. Stephen, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. I appreciate the additional time to add just a few more items that I want to bring to your attention. I don't know if I mentioned it in my previous comments, but I do represent some neighbors of the North Broadway properties. I'm a licensed engineer in New York State, and I have over 35 years of experience in preparing traffic impact studies for development of all types and sizes, and also have represented interested and concerned neighbors on projects development projects and proposed rezonings. I recently did some work in the city of Mount Vernon, where they proposed a zoning change to produce a mixed use retail zoning. And bottom line on it was that the city wanted and had us do a detailed environmental impact study on the proposed zoning change. It was important to them, and they wanted to know what the maximum build out could be under that new zoning and how it would affect not only traffic, but all of the other significant environmental conditions, including things like drainage, utilities, police protection, fire protection, and so on. And all of those items are really looked at in detail in an environmental impact study or environmental, either a generic one or a draft environmental statement. Also going back to the AKRF memo, their build-out estimate was based on 87 age-restricted units and 65 multifamily residential units. The procedure that they used to determine those numbers wasn't included in their memo. Their memo, as far as traffic was concerned, contained a couple of tables and a short paragraph about trip generation, which is really far short of the detailed analysis that, in my experience, is really necessary to understand what you're going to get when you change a zoning from a relatively thin density with single family units and some office space to a really potentially dense development with multifamily housing, senior housing, additional office space, and the potential for other uses that are permitted in the zone, in particular like a church or a school or community center. Although there are no proposals for anything at this point, I think the idea that the detailed environmental studies would produce a real picture of what could happen, and in spite of where the traffic comes from, what the maximum build out would produce in terms of traffic is important to know, so that you can craft a zoning amendment that doesn't create the kind of congestion that would cause significant delays and additional problems that would go unmitigated if you're left to basically having the planning board try to figure out what to do to fix a situation because the zoning allowed a certain level of development that should not have been open-doored, a door open to allow that to happen. The last note would be that the previous study that I mentioned, the Brightview development, was given as 150 units of assisted living. And the proposed zoning, even though I think it's still a low number, would allow for 155, 156 units of mixed development, senior and multifamily. Know that assisted living is a lower traffic generator. And even at the 150, which is comparable to the number that the town is envisioning with the proposed zoning, even with that lower traffic generator, they still found that there would be some congestion issues on Broadway that needed to be mitigated. So with a higher density and the potential for a lot more traffic from the proposed uses, those conditions could be or would be worse under that zoning. So I would ask that the procedure that you're basing this on be allowed for us to review it. And I would urge you to make sure that you know the full generating potential of the four properties, the maximum potential, and do this by commissioning a detailed traffic study as you previously described. So finally, as I described in my letter, a hard look requirement of seeker determination. When it's all combined, a fully informed decision regarding the viability of the proposed zone can be made. And without those studies, the village is really risking future adverse impacts, which will not be mitigated and will significantly degrade the already congested conditions on North Broadway and the various intersections there. And once again, I thank you for your patience and for listening to my comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next up, Peter Budieri. Welcome back, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. I'll just go back to my letter. I'll try to be brief. So the impact on the community character and on the community plan is what I was talking about. The negative declaration or determination that the board made doesn't answer a lot of questions. And when you do try to answer them, you come up with the fact that this project could actually increase the population of Irvington by 7.1% if you assembled all the properties and if you assembled the North Street properties and you put non-senior housing on them. But those 7.1% of the people in Irvington would be on 0.5% of the land, just as Glenn Cashin said, they're just concentrated on a very small piece of land. My letter also quotes the New York State DEC workbook on this thing about community character. And as many of the people have been talking about, it includes the visual character of the town, the buildings and structures and their uses, the natural environment, and the sheer size of this is going to affect the community character quite a bit, although the Secret Declaration says that it won't. There's historic character, which the preservationist letter refers to. And I think finally, I wanted to comment about Mayor Smith comment at the very beginning about wanting a diversity of housing in town. I keep on asking the board how much affordable housing we should have or we want to have, and I never get an answer. We have about 21%, but when you're talking about the diversity of different housing types, I actually just found another garden apartment project that I hadn't noticed or included before, Hamilton Gardens, just south of Clinton Street. It brings up to the number of garden apartments to 604 out of our 2,300, which is more than a quarter of our apartments. The total, if you include the townhouses, Hudson House, the affordable houses on North and South Astor Street, you've got 1,000 units that are multifamily units. That's 43% of our housing stock. So I think that's just a non-reason for doing this concentrated, huge multifamily development. The diversity of housing is a non-reason for it. We already have an extremely diverse housing stock. We have an extremely economically diverse population, as I've discussed before. And I don't know why we are doing something that's going to be so damaging to the urban character or the small town character of Irvington in light of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris Wall. You're on mute. Maybe come back to Chris. We'll go to David Gordon. Chris, if you want to say something, you can raise your hand again. Go ahead, David.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted real quick to circle back to one point that I wanted to add, and also that actually other folks mentioned as well. And that's the question about the review of the impact of traffic and the idea that don't worry about doing it now because we can wait until other projects come along, because any other project that comes along is going to require its own seeker review. I just want to make the point that with certain impacts, particularly traffic, the most legitimate time to do a seeker review of something like a rezoning when you're looking at multiple potential projects is at the time of the rezoning, for two reasons. First of all, traffic obviously aggregates all of the contributors to the road. And if you do it one by one, you're going to miss those cumulative impacts. Secondly, at the rezoning, you actually define what the legitimate projects are. In this case, one of the legitimate projects is multifamily zoning. In another case, it might be single family. The point is that tells a developer what they can do. And then when you do the seeker review, that defines what they can do. It defines what the seeker review is going to say. And then if you were to say at that point, well, you know, we don't really think this is a good idea. We didn't do the seeker review before on traffic, and now we're doing it now. And there's just too many cars. They're going to turn around and say, this is what you've defined in your zoning law. This is what you recommended. This is what you're allowing. And for those reasons, it's very, very important to do it now. You cannot do an effective job where you're already looking at a situation where there is, you know, traffic congestion. You can't do an effective job on a piecemeal basis later on. It's right now that you're defining the allowable uses, and it's right now that you can aggregate it. And that's, I think, what Mr. Mafia is saying. And I was responding to some of the other points, particularly the one made by the attorney for the landowner. One other point that he made that I just want to talk about, he kind of characterized the points that are being made as spaghetti or scattershot or some type of idea like that. You know, when folks go ahead and hire responsible professionals, and I mean, we're not talking about all these things under the sun. We're talking about the most obvious and pertinent potential impacts. And I think, you know, most everybody recognizes that. And so I would object to the kind of the disparaging characterization of people that are speaking about what they know is happening in their neighborhood. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, David. Boris Rubenstein.
Thank you very much for allowing me again.
Sure.
I couldn't read my notes. I have bad handwriting. So I forgot just one point that I wanted to mention. When you were talking about the impact on services, I think the comment was that the fire department and the police department believed that there was not going to be an increase in the need for services. And just think about numbers. Was this a belief, or this was a study done with numbers that actually document that there's not going to be an increase in the need for police and firemen time? Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Fable.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak again. I did want to highlight one thing, which is I found that the Westchester County Historical Society, as well as a historical preservationist, wrote two very compelling letters that really should be considered. You know, both of them kind of said the same thing, that the views and the character of North Broadway corridor are defining features of Irvington, and that they would be, you know, by building this, you know, massive building right along the corridor, that it will destroy the historic integrity of the site and the scenic character of North Broadway. So it just, you know, just boggles my mind how this, you know, doesn't seem to be taken into consideration. Even the stone wall that's lining the roadside is not protected. I mean, that's beautiful. It's old. It's part of our history. And the zoning could, you know, potentially allow it to be removed or modified. And I think that's just wrong. And I guess one last point is that I've been, you know, walking around Irvington with, you know, walking my dog, and, you know, I bring a petition with me, and I've got to meet so many wonderful residents. A lot of them are new to Irvington, and they've come to the city. And when they hear about about this, the reason that they've said that they've come to the city or come to Irvington from the city is because they don't, you know, they like the small town. They don't want an urban setting with more people. They want less people because of COVID. So they, you know, they were all also disheartened by adding more to the population when We all moved here for all of the green and open spaces and all of the trees. And we just don't want that taken away from us. We think it'll impact our quality of life. I mean, I grew up in Irvington, and, after college, I was living in Manhattan for the last 20 years, and I just recently moved back. And that's also one of the reasons I moved back, is because, I wanted that small, less people. But thank you for allowing me to speak again.
Thank you. Kim Raby? Kimberly?
Hi, Kimberly Raby, 20 Strawberry Lane. I wanted to ask a question that I've heard the board mention on several occasions regarding scale and massing. Because as you know, we've obviously we're talking about that quite a bit. And after looking at Peter's drawings, what I've heard you say is the planning board and the architectural review board will take care of any architectural issues regarding scale and massing if it's out of scale within the context of the neighborhood. So my question is, has the planning board and architectural review board seen a copy of the latest draft? We know that the housing committee is unanimously behind it, but has anyone from planning or architectural review been part of this process?
I haven't spoken to them, so I'm not sure. I know some of them are paying attention to it because we've discussed it, but not we haven't asked for a formal opinion from those boards, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, it's been in my experience. I've been through planning board several times. I've been through architectural review board. And it's my understanding and my experience, my personal experience, that they don't have any jurisdiction over scale that's not prescribed in the zoning code. And really the only thing that our ARB can do is really look at the facade and detailing, but not necessarily size and mass. So I would just ask, do you need to have someone from planning and ARB as part of this process before it's signed off?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Anything else, sir? Okay. Glenn Cashin.
Yeah, hey, Glenn Cashin, 81 North Broadway. Thanks for the second opportunity tonight. I just wanted to address what the attorney for the Maxon property said just briefly. Somebody else mentioned this too, the characterization of, spaghetti being thrown to the wall to see what sticks. Well, I just, that spaghetti is the guts of the community concerned about this change. It's a big change. It's very impactful. And I think that there's a lot of merit to the opposition here. And if the object of the attorney is to go one way or another so that the property owner can dispose of their property, then just walk away from the zoning change, leave it as is, and let them deal with the property in their own right. I just also want to say that, there were 2 petitions that were delivered today that were emailed with a fairly significant number of opposition, of signatures opposed to this. And it seems like, the more we get into, the more this idea of the growth on the North Broadway corridor seeps beyond the confines of the small number of people that have been attending these calls, the more people you'll find are opposed to it. And I think, Brian, you mentioned that earlier when somebody asked how many people are opposed and not, and you said it was the equal measure. There's no vote, right? So we don't really have that idea. But I think the more that that we penetrate this idea into the community, the more we hear, people are opposed to it. So that's it. I thank you very much for another opportunity to speak against this, and I hope you vote no or just pull it off the table completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Stephanie Gable again.
I just wanted to, I failed to mention this earlier, but to Glenn's point, how many people are opposed to it? The petition that was submitted was almost 400 people. And that's a significant portion of the Irvington residents that do not want to see this rezoning happen. So that's how many people are opposed to it.
Well, at least that's the number of people that signed that petition.
Right. There's probably more. You're correct.
Yeah. Well, if I drew if I cleared out the building in front of the historic house and had nothing else and said, this is what we're proposing, which you could build, to me, that the picture wasn't exactly fair. Just like the way that some of those, some people were using all the historic houses in Irvington in their petition. Didn't seem fair either, but we definitely take them all seriously. And I think to a couple of you made a point that, the lawyer for the Rubensteins said that you guys are throwing spaghetti on the wall. I think I speak for the entire board when I say we don't consider it that. We're listening to everyone and what they have to say and their concerns, because who are our neighbors, and I live not too far away from here, actually where Strawberry Lane comes out. So to me, it's we're taking all of your comments seriously and don't consider it spaghetti. Or even good, well al dente, al dente linguine or anything. We appreciate all the comments. Francis Gowdy.
Yeah, I'll speak to the attorney from Maxon's comments, which were definitely pretty insulting toward a lot of the thoughtful discussion that we've had here. This isn't simply a NIMBY situation. The rezoning that's proposed is likely to very, very much change the character of the village, particularly in that area, to densify it, to concentrate traffic, and to have impacts on the historic buildings there. But another of his points was about saleability. And I think it's in the back of a lot of people's minds that the driver here seems to be the Maxon Corporation getting their maximum bang for their buck. Now, when Maxon, Carafiello, et cetera, purchased, zoning was half acre. They knew what they had. So coming in, their eyes were open, and going out. If in the interim, while they've owned that property, between the time they bought it and the time they sold it, the market for, say, offices, commercial offices, has softened a bit. Well, that's not incumbent on the people, the taxpayer of Irvington to remedy. So his tone was dismissive toward us, the citizens, and he sounded rather impatient with how long things have taken. And given the number of people and the number of comments here, I think an awful lot more deliberation is required before even thinking about voting on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Nikki Connington.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted to speak up, address a few comments that I've heard. One is that, you're hearing that there are a lot of people who are opposed to this that haven't been heard from. And I would like to say that there's probably a lot of people that are supporting at least the idea of multifamily affordable housing on that site. I'll leave aside the question of density. People who have lived here, raised their kids here, and their kids can't afford to live here. and maybe maybe they have a small business, maybe they're afraid to speak out because it could affect their small business. In my case, you know, I've lived here for 29 years. I could not have afforded to buy a house in Irvington 29 years ago if I hadn't bought an estate that was practically falling down, that needed, you know, so much repair. And we've downsized, and I hope, you know, I hope to live here for the rest of my life. But I know a lot of people who, you know, they don't make enough money even to have, you know, a garden apartment perhaps. And, you know, Hudson House is not exactly an example of affordable multifamily housing. I was on the original Broadway Corridor Working Group, and, you know, it's that the comprehensive plan and the report of the recommendations of the Broadway Corridor Working Group have been characterized in a number of ways tonight. And I'd like to point out that it wasn't that it was supposed to remain exactly as it is. And multifamily housing was, you know, considered, you know, a part of the action plan, and a survey of residents in a survey of residents as reported in the comprehensive plan, approximately half felt that there should be multifamily housing there. So I'm for affordable housing in the village. We all benefit. We all benefit. It's not just, you know, the rich property owner that, you know, is going to walk away. We all benefit from having a diverse population, and I don't mean just racially, but you know, economically. We benefit from having employees and volunteers be able to live here. And not just wealthy people who moved up, you know, from the city and perhaps, you know, can afford a house big, you know, better because of that. We all benefit, and you know, as a value of, you know, of the village, I, you know, support affordable multifamily housing. That said, it does sound as though there should be some further data-driven study on traffic impacts. Because, you know, that's certainly, and I can understand the issue of the neighbors and anybody who drives on Broadway. The walkability needs to be really looked at. If you're relying on public transportation for people in the multifamily buildings.
Nikki, hi, you're a little over 3 minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'll wrap it up. So data, you know, more study on the traffic for sure. And the suggestion of an urban design professional to help with a little bit more sophisticated visualization than those big gray boxes that have been portrayed that are, you know, I can understand why they'd be scary looking to people. But that's it. Thank you. And thanks for all your work on this. I know it's been a slog.
Thanks, Nikki. Mayor Smith had to step away for a minute. Gordon is the next. There's no last name. You could just introduce yourself.
Yes, this is Gordon Fury. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm Gordon Fury at 99 Bracebridge Lane. Bracebridge Lane is north of Meadowbrook and south of Sunnyside. So we're right in the area of Broadway that is at issue here. I am not an expert at all these zoning kinds of technicalities, and I've really, really appreciated the input from my neighbors and other people on this call tonight and at meetings going back years. I'm totally supportive of all the kinds of things they brought up. And I am just sort of sitting at a little bit of a distance here. I'm just so struck by the lack of support for this proposal. You know, where are all the people besides Cuddy and Federer and the owner who want this? You know, I don't hear about it. You know, I myself want so much for Irvington to increase the diversity, increase the variety of housing, to just enhance our lives. However, there is this thing about Irvington that it's all we've got, this North Broadway corridor and the kind of landscape and the kind of proportional kinds of buildings that we have in our environment. It's all we've got. You can take that away by simply causing traffic congestion on Broadway, where somebody is sitting in their car for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, a half an hour, and all of a sudden life stops functioning here. Taking your child to school, trying to get to a doctor's appointment, it all stops. You know, you can't be here anymore. You know, and so at the very first thing, I just plea with the board to consider is keep what we have and work with it and improve it in a careful way. So, you know, back to Cuddy and Federer, the lawyer, you know, real estate is a speculative activity. You win some and you lose some. So the owner can't, maybe is not going to be able to get top dollar. You win some and I'm sorry, but that's the way real estate works. No doubt there are plenty of other deals out there that will work. So, and you've been at this for 2 to 3 years. Well, you know, maybe it'll take another 2 to 3 years. This is that big an issue if you're trying to preserve the thing that we love. It's complicated. I don't see that the village has yet been able to participate or to be able to create competitive planning ideas to the extent that we should. But if this gets approved, if you vote yes on this, there will be hell to pay. It won't be the end of it. People will realize what has happened and it will be a problem. Please vote no. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Oh, there's some hands. Oh, let's put Ellen back up, Larry. Hope she has a good connection. Hello, Ellen. Hello.
No,
Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Yes, it's not working, Alan. Let's go to Dave Gaucho. Oh, so we went to Audi Bloom first. Sorry.
Hi guys, again. I'll be brief. I just feel compelled to say also that I was offended by the Maxon Council statement that we're just trying to drag our heels and throwing spaghetti on the wall. Yeah, that kind of statement makes me even more worried about the underlying intentions here and about the commitment to the community. In actuality, I've only heard overwhelming opposition to the proposal from the people that are speaking in the meeting. Yeah, this is very personal. It's about the safety of our kids. It's about our livelihoods. It's about livability. It's about the future of our small little quaint village. Brian, I really wanted to say I really appreciated your acknowledgement of everyone's concerns, and I know that you're an impacted member of the community as well. And wanted to reiterate that this is such a major decision that it warrants the time to get to the right solution. It feels like we're not too far off, and that with more engagement, we can get to that right solution. So thanks again.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, if if all the comments have been spaghetti the whole time, it's made our dish of pasta a heck of a lot better than it was 2 years ago. So looks like a hand went down. Oh, Dave Gaushu.
Yes, sorry, it's Gusho. Thank you, Mayor Smith. No offense meant by this question, but does anyone on the board have a conflict of interest in regards to the property owners?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Should we give Ellen one last try here? Ellen? Seems like we're 0 for 5. I think there's a golden sombrero.
So Brian,
Yeah, it looks like that's it for hands. For now.
okay, so Brian, did you want me to respond to some of this stuff?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, okay, the technical things. First, I want to clarify, I'm not obviously in favor of this project, as Mr. Gowdy said. My job is to represent the board and to help the board make their decision. It's not my business to be for or against a project. And I'll kind of go in order, other than that, in order of the comments. First on the traffic, I know Steve Maffey had a lot of comments, and other people did as well. But people should understand this was not a traffic study. We understand, we know what traffic studies are. We've seen them, we've done them. But the understanding was that when a project came in, it would have to do a full-blown traffic study. And so one of the special permit requirements is that the planning board shall not issue a special permit unless it's satisfied that the proposed use will not result in an unmitigated significant adverse impact at any of the intersections identified by the planning board. So any project that comes in has to do that. The reason we asked AKRF to look at it just to let us know whether we were creating impossible zoning. There was some concern that with the traffic that would get generated from the number we gave them was 155 residential units, be impossible to mitigate. And if that was the case, we would have been creating zoning that was impossible to achieve. And just from there, what somebody referred to as the back of the envelope study, I think it was a little bit more than that, but that it was doable. There would need to be mitigation. It would be doable. They asked where the number 155 came from. There was assuming 87 multifamily with a moderate income. No, 87 senior. The one property would be developed with 87 senior units, and 68 would be, the other property would be developed with 68 regular with a moderate income bonus. So it was the most realistic worst case that you would have one developed for senior housing and one maxed out for the other. So the board understands entirely that there's going to have to be a full traffic study when a particular project comes in. It's very difficult to do these without a particular project, and virtually all traffic studies are done. I'm not saying every, but virtually all traffic studies are done when there's a particular project, and there will have to be one, not only to comply with SECRA, because any project that comes in is going to have to do SECRA, but also to meet the special permit requirement that it have will not result in an unmitigated significant adverse impact. And Steve Maffey also mentioned that that a significant impact was defined too narrowly, that it wouldn't include going from a level, I'm sorry for everybody's very specific, but it wouldn't include going from a level C to a level of service D. Actually, it would. When it says it going to E or F, but the beginning of that standard says, at a minimum, the following shall be deemed a significant adverse impact, a degradation in service from to E or F. That doesn't mean that other, like a degradation, well, a degradation from A to B might not be significant because there's no delay there. But in any event, it's up to the planning board to determine whether there'll be an unmitigated significant adverse impact. If there are, they don't meet the standards for the special permit. Let me just make sure there was nothing else here on the traffic thing. Okay, then on the historic building and concern about that, I think people have to understand right now there are 0 protections on any of those historic buildings, either the mansion on the Maxon property or the lovely stone buildings on the Carafiello property. There is protection for the stone wall on Broadway, although not protection for the stone wall on Strawberry Lane. That's not covered by the villages. Right now, a developer could come in and tear down those stone buildings, tear down the mansion, and there's nothing you could do about it. Under the proposed zoning, there's two reasons for, well, one reason for them to, a developer to keep the buildings up, and that's that there's actually an incentive to maintain the buildings there because they don't count in coverage and they don't count in FAR. So you can have, all the maximum coverage on your other building, and these are essentially a freebie as a way to encourage developers to keep them up. And then really more importantly, another one of the special permit requirements is, and I'm gonna read the introductory sentence again because it's important. The planning board shall require that no special permit be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the proposed use will not have a significant visual impact on the character of the neighborhood, including but not limited to the following. And that's existing buildings that reflect the historic character of the village of Irvington shall be maintained or adaptively reused to the greatest extent practicable. And then, okay. Anyway, that's way more protection than current zoning affords to those buildings. All right, then I'm going in the order these things came up. All right, now Peter Buderi's 2 comments on, well, there's a lot of comments, but related to 2 of the answers on the environmental assessment form, and I guess the fun is, okay, let me read. The one was question 17, which is consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. They answered no. Larry, would you put the 2 pages of the relevant pages of the comp plan update up? I think it's important for people to see this. Okay.
Let me know how far down.
Yeah, hold on. Go to. Okay, on paragraph 2. Read the end of that. Significantly, some of the larger parcels are occupied by uses that are not currently permitted by the zoning code. principally office and institutional uses, but are legal either because a use variance was issued or the use is a legally pre-existing nonconformity. Now go down a little bit, Larry, to the last paragraph on that page. Okay, with respect to those properties, the Comprehensive Plan Committee recommended that the zoning be amended to reflect the current and historic uses of those properties. The problem with the current underlying residential zoning of those properties is that it does not mirror the actual uses. The current zoning permits only single-family detached houses and by special permit church and cultural uses. If the properties were redeveloped as single-family residential, the open space and existing topography would be greatly compromised. Okay, Larry, keep going. And then to the action plan. In order to maintain the properties on the northeast portion of the Broadway corridor, roughly as they are used now, a new zoning district should be created for them, perhaps multifamily, commercial, institutional. Permitted uses that the Comprehensive Plan Committee came up with were multifamily residential, including single-family attached, assisted living, office, research and design, art galleries, retail, medical offices or facilities. As you know, a bunch of those uses came out because people were concerned about the traffic and the noise in the evenings. The zoning should include incentives for preserving historic structures, providing affordable housing, and furnishing other public amenities. So I think it's really, really hard to argue that this zoning plan is not consistent with the comprehensive plan recommendation. And then a couple of the points that Peter made in connection with this, and this also responds to Kim Raby's comments about the increase in coverage. And it says, and it's not accurate really to argue that the building coverage increases from 50,500 to 129,000. The coverage that's currently permitted, I'm not talking about the coverages there, the coverage is currently permitted under the existing zoning is 93,436 square feet. What's allowed, the maximum under the proposed zoning with all the bonuses, and remember, you only get those bonuses if you give extra affordable housing, you provide a sidewalk, you provide things that have a real benefit to the village, then the coverage can be 113,516 square feet. So it's like $20,000 square feet more. Without those bonuses, the maximum coverage is 78,967 square feet, which is 15,000 square feet less than what's allowed under the current zoning. All right, then the next question, question 18. Read it from the, I'm sorry, I have papers all over the place. The proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. And the village's response on this, the board hasn't voted on it yet, but the draft response is that the proposed zoning is consistent with community character. The regulations are consistent with the current development of the properties in the new zoning district. Now, Peter objected to that, but that's exactly it. The existing uses are being made legal. Right now, they're only permitted by variance. They would be made legal. So the regulations are consistent with the current development. Then more from our answer. In addition, the multifamily residential use, which does not currently exist on those properties, is consistent with the multifamily zoning district immediately north of the new zoning district. Now, the zoning district immediately to the north has 208 residential units. Now, the density factor there, bear in mind that the density factor that was created for the MFO district is 3,000. The density factor at the two buildings north on one of the lots is 2,700, on the other lot 2,925. if you take into account the bonus for the density bonus for the moderate income units, the density factor gets to be 2,500. So we're roughly in the same league. For senior housing, it does go to 2,000, but senior housing has virtually no impacts on traffic or school children or anything. Now there isn't any, once you answer no to the first question, you don't have to go to the other questions on the page. But I think on under the community character one, because that was talked about a lot, it's easy to see that even if we did have to go to those questions, the answer would still be either no or small impacts. That the proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community. As I said, right now, there's no incentives to keep the historic buildings there. Under the proposed zoning there is. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services, schools, fire, and police. A couple of townspeople asked what numbers did they base that on, and the number was based on the number they were asked to consider were 155 more residential units. Again, assuming, that's the most realistic worst case, that you would have one senior building and one multifamily building, all built to the maximum. And they were asked about the 155, and Larry could give you but they did actually talk to other communities, and they didn't just like make it up and say there's not going to be any impact. I believe Larry put the letters were attached to one of the agendas, right?
I believe so, but everything's posted to the website, to the webpage for.
Yeah, so you can see how they made the decision. Then the next thing under consistency with community character, there's 5 altogether, so don't worry, I'm on the 3rd. The proposed action may displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there's a shortage of such housing. Clearly, this is not. This will create affordable housing. The proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources. That's not really relevant. And then the proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character. And again, I'm going to go back to the special permit requirements, that no special permit shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the proposed use will be in harmony with the character and appearance of neighboring properties in the village as a whole. Special permits cannot be issued unless they meet those requirements. And this notion that what's going to go up there is a giant concrete box with no windows, that's not what those drawings were, or depictions were mainly to give the board some sense of what kind of mass are we talking about. Can you live with that much mass? Not about what kind of development would you live with. They're not going to be close to looking like that. And also on this one, that you argued that the letter argued that the combined gross floor area under the new zoning is going to increase by 243%. Actually, the total gross floor area permitted goes down under the proposed zoning, even with all the bonuses. Even if you got all the bonuses, under the existing zoning, you could have a total floor area of 280,000. Under the proposed zoning, the maximum gross floor area is 200, and that's with all the bonuses, 249,162. So it's more than 3,000 square feet smaller than what's permitted under the existing zoning. And then the other thing about the appearance, because I guess this was that somebody was saying how different the appearance would be, because the comp plan said the appearance should be the same. And And the board actually, and the zoning gets to that in a lot of respects by saying that the stone walls have to be preserved, the historic structures have to be preserved, because those, maybe the mansion's not really visible, but those stone buildings are on the KEF property. And also, as Brian mentioned, the setback was doubled from Broadway. So things are going to be set further back. All right, to respond to Mr. Gordon about the supermajority petition, it'll only become relevant if your vote is 3-2. If it's either 4-1 or 5-0, you pass by a supermajority. So if that happens, then we'll look to count whether the right number of property owners signed and everything. All right, and then I think unless the board can think of questions I missed on that, but I think you guys may well want to address, why you decided on multifamily housing. I think that was touched on, but I think maybe people need a little bit further explanation of that, because you weren't just talking. It's not just affordable housing. Why you wanted multifamily housing and why we got to where we did on this. So can you think of anything I missed? Larry, you were keeping score there.
Yeah, no, you had one more than I had, so you're good.
Oh yeah, about the supermajority petition, but this is really sort of irrelevant. I think we'll see how it comes out. Okay, that's it for. I'm obviously can answer anything more.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've spoken a lot tonight, so I will be happy to defer to my colleagues.
Well, I'll add a few things. It's a long night, and I'm very appreciative of all the comments and time everyone has spent on this. Really, I think if you've just listened to what Mary Ann filled you in on, they're the kinds of things that I know it would be very hard for someone in the public to have followed in that kind of detail. For instance, what all of the special permit parts are that add to the core of this zoning. So I guess my feeling is that all the things that I heard tonight are things that I've thought about. I would like to address particularly the thing that people know I have a lot of passion about, and that is Irvington as a historic small town with character. Mary Ann really answered the specifics of why there is better protection in this zoning, proposed zoning change than there is now. I actually appreciated that Westchester County Historical Society's Barbara Davis said she would be willing to work with us going forward on issues of preservation. I also appreciated the letter from our own Irvington Historical Society. Believe me, they are passionate about preservation. And I think they looked very carefully at the clauses in this zoning that are protective, as Mary Ann explained, in this zoning, protective of the building. I realize that the issue of the entire landscape going forward, like Lyndhurst, we don't have that. And I just say that I think with good architecture, good planning, good development, that an integration of some new uses there, as Mary Ann said, it wouldn't be that box, that gray box. And I think everyone, really in their heart of hearts knows that was just an image. And I respect everyone who is concerned about the mass, but I think the part that makes me feel good about all of this is so many people have responded to how much they care about the character and the historic nature of the village. I think I would encourage a relooking at our local landmark law. We have a local landmark law. There are several properties up there who could apply for a local landmark status. They could apply for state and national status. They can join a committee in the Irvington Historical Society to work on these issues going forward, village-wide. So I don't feel that we've diminished by this zoning our concern for the character, for why I live here. And I think there's greater hope for that maintaining of that character with this zoning, because I know that the planning board, the architectural review board, and all those features of the special permits are going to help in that particular effort in the village. So thank you.
Anybody else from the board want to say anything?
Yes, just very briefly. Thank you, Connie, for that about the historical aspects of this. Again, in context, we've listened to a lot of comments, we've heard your concerns, but what I come back to is housing and the need for housing. And the county housing assessment has talked about the need for multifamily, affordable, and senior housing. And we also have many multifamily housing units in Irvington already, as many of you have pointed out, and they have been seamlessly included into the life of this community, the schools, every part of this community. This is one that's quite literally for many people here looming large, because it's either across the street or across Broadway or it's right on Broadway. But we've tried to balance all of the goods here, including preserving the setbacks, preserving the historic elements, making sure that we're zoning it so that there's some control over the scale and size. If any kind of zoning will bring change, but doing nothing is not a viable solution in my view. So I think this is a good plan, and I appreciate Mary Ann's addressing the many questions that came up during this very vibrant discussion. Thanks.
Larry, Mark?
Well, I would just add that, everyone's entitled to their view of our village. Everyone's entitled to their view of our village's past and our village's present and our village's future. And I understand a lot of the concerns that people have voiced. I think our decision and our view has been informed by the village comprehensive plan, and even going back to the original comprehensive plan back in 2003, the suggestion there was to update zoning to provide a benefit to the community, such as affordable or senior housing, and to encourage cluster development, including multifamily units. So that's back in 2003. And to my knowledge, since 2003, there hasn't been a single multifamily unit built. All new construction has been a single family housing. And, and again, the Westchester County needs assessment, again, quoting them, they're talking about creating more affordable housing opportunities, but they're saying it can't be done in only one way, that one size does not fit all, and a range of housing opportunities is needed. And I think that's informing our decision, along with a lot of input, not just from the Housing Committee, but from affordable housing experts,
from development experts, from financing, the multifamily financing people. And, and all of that has really sort of informed our decision and our reasoning for why we're doing what we're doing. Again, everyone's entitled to their opinion and their view. And I guess in this day and age, people are also entitled to their own sort of set of facts. People can present facts in lots of different ways. But I'm comfortable that the board has effectively addressed most, if not all, of the issues that we've heard tonight, including taxes, including density, traffic, schools, preservation of the environment, preservation of historic structures. By including these things in our zoning draft and in the requirements for the special permits.
Mark, anything?
You're on mute, Mark.
Normally when I hit my space bar, it goes off mute, but it didn't this time. I'm not going to really add too much. I think that the sets of comments that the other trustees have made are pretty all-encompassing. And I do have to underline something that Larry Lonke said, which is there's been a lot of concerned reactions, and there's been also a lot of shared misinformation going around, or information that doesn't really match the current state of where the code provisions were at, and specifics of the numbers, the arithmetic, et cetera. So I think that, everyone has a point of view to defend. I think what's interesting about the board here is that we all, 5 of us, come from totally different points of view and different emphasis, and yet we all kind of gone through this process over a number of months, 2 years, and have reached a conclusion that we're at a pretty good balance point right now. And as we hear more from different community members, I'm not, I guess I'm not swayed to do further input. There's a lot of stuff that happened, over the last 2 years that people are not discussing and coming up with ideas that we should halt the process. Well, I don't really agree with that. I think we should, if the board wants to vote on all of this right now, I think we should vote on it. And then, there'll be a process after that, if there needs to be, to somehow work on each individual project, obviously, as they come forward, when they come forward. Has been outlined multiple times, the strengths of our planning board review and our ARB review process. So anyways, that's it.
Brian, can I just say one quick thing? Actually, Mark was hitting on it. Is there's going to be an opportunity. All of these uses are special permit uses, and you can only get a special permit after a public hearing before the planning board. And my guess is it's, not going to be resolved in one night if it's a controversial thing. So everybody's going to get a chance to speak at the to go to the public hearing on the special permit and to give their input when a particular project comes in.
Yeah, I guess I'll speak for a little bit here, but kind of this weekend I was kind of reminiscing back about growing up in Irvington, and I remember one of my most vivid memories was taking the bus home from Dow's Lane. I think it was 1984, 83. I think I was in 4th or 5th grade, and Field Point was being built. And I remember seeing like the clear cutting of the trees, and I remember being appalled by it. And I think I literally came to tears when I got home and I found out that they were building something. So I think one of the things about this area is that even though it's fairly open, it is, the Maxon property is pretty built out with, the commercial building as well as the historic building. The Carafiello property obviously has a big lawn that everybody likes, but, to me, the fact that, we are putting in such large setbacks, that to me does preserve a lot of the character of those properties. I also think back, to more recent history when I voted against the assisted living facility there because I thought it was out of character. I just thought it was too big. I voted against it, and I originally thought that in this area, and I was on the comprehensive plan committee or subcommittee that worked on the Broadway rezoning. I was excited about a lot of the creative commercial uses. The boutique hotel I thought would be, great for Irvington, and we're known for our restaurants already, and to have some kind of destination restaurants there or something. But we really did hear from the residents that, and it rang true that they didn't want to be, they when they moved there, it was residential and there was used as offices. And, they didn't want to have, a wedding at 11 o'clock midnight on a Saturday night when they're trying to sit in their backyard. It all kind of made sense. And that's, we've tweaked this and tweaked this and tweaked this. And then I look too, just to the north, there are two, multifamily developments that have really been the backbone of our community. A lot of my friends growing up, a lot of my fellow volunteer firefighters live there, and then if you add in, all the other co-ops in town, that is a lot of our volunteers live in those co-ops. And, as Larry said, other than the DiNardo project, which is stalled, there hasn't been any multifamily. And I guess that's detached single family homes technically, but it kind of feels like a multifamily project. We haven't had any new stock in, probably almost 70 years, at least 60 years. So I think that there could be a good development here that would be great for everybody. That would include affordable housing. Connie and I have heard for years and years and years that, I can't live here, or my parents can't live here, or my kids can't live here. And this is, we've been talking about doing something, and these pieces of property were one of the only areas that we could potentially do something. And I do think traffic is an issue. I think it's a major issue. I think there's already a traffic problem there. I drove to I used to work in Tarrytown for years, and I had to make the right out of Riverview Road, which was good because it was the only way you could go, but then you'd sit there for 20 minutes. And when I have to go to the train, or now I go to the train, I often have to go right anyway because you can't make the left out of Riverview if you don't go early enough, or I guess late enough. So I think traffic is going to limit this some. I think when the full traffic study is done, except if they can come up with some creative mitigating, ideas, it's going to be the limiting factor, in my opinion. And I don't think you get close to 150 units just because of traffic. But who knows what happens in the future when Elon Musk creates all self-driving cars and no one owns one anymore? Who knows? But for now, I think traffic is going to be a huge limiting factor. And I do have great trust in our planning boards and our ARB to not allow an IKEA box to be placed in front of a historic building. I also hope that the developers know that wouldn't be something that we would allow here. Following Connie's championship, everyone on this board is historic preservation is very important to all of us. And we would never want to see a box like that. And I just don't think that is even a conceivable possibility. But when you go out and you look at some multifamily, I've looked at a bunch of affordable multifamily developments in Westchester and beyond. And honestly, they're super attractive. And this is all affordable, and I'm not sure if all affordable can be viable there, but maybe it can. But, seeing some of these developments, I could picture them on that site, and they don't look like a giant IKEA box. They look super attractive. I live on Riverview Road. Strawberry Lane can be an alternate way to get to my house. I also walk up it sometimes. And the current commercial building there is not a historic gem at all. The building behind it is, but I think that, we're just starting to appreciate it now. And also these laws, this proposed zoning, gives it, while there's no, outright protections, there are none now, but we create a lot of incentives to keep it, and as well as the stone buildings, the outbuildings on the Carafiello property. So, I think that there's a lot of things accomplished here, even with historic preservation, that we don't currently have. So, I think for a lot of reasons, we've worked very hard on this. That's the main reason why I think this is it's a much better law than it was 2 years ago. But I don't think it's going to get much better in 2 years from now. I think we've kind of heard the same things brought up, traffic, historic preservation, density overall, and I think that, as I think Connie said, I think we've addressed most of those. I think, Marianne addressed a lot of those today. And I think the other truism that we haven't mentioned tonight, which we usually do, is that we don't own these properties. And what can be done as of right now is you can knock down all those buildings and build something. I think that, the comprehensive plan committee gave us a vision for this area. We've tweaked that vision. We've actually, tweaked it back, in my opinion. And we've come up with a vastly different law that's, from public input. That's been great. And I don't think we've heard too much new, which is why we haven't changed it too much in the last several months. So, and as far as participation, we had, I think it was 65 was the highest number I saw tonight. It might've been 64, but I thought I saw 65. We've never had 65 people be able to attend a meeting. It's difficult to come down to a meeting in person. We know it better than anybody. But I think of the Rabies when they had young children at home and they had to get babysitters and come down. I'm hoping that this has made it easier for them. And I think, for the most part, this has been a positive for getting more input. And frankly, we're looking to continue this as a hybrid going forward because I think we found it so valuable, as well as sharing screens and things like that. But it's also easy for people to dial in. They can watch it all over the world on Facebook. It just seems so much more accessible than it was before. And frankly, we would have done things like this, but we weren't allowed to under law. So maybe something good has come out of a pandemic. But at this point, I think I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing. So I think we've heard lots of great input all around. I don't know if I can get a second on that, but.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I guess now I'll switch and ask if everyone on the board thinks they have enough information, all the information they need to vote on the proposal.
Yeah.
First is the.
Yeah, but before we move forward on any of it, Larry, I just wanted to see if anyone needs more information or if they think they have enough.
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess then we're going to go to approval of determination of significance regarding a proposed local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create a multifamily office district. Do you have anything to preference this with, or are we just?
Oh, Brian, are you working on, is that the secret resolution you're gonna read now?
Yeah.
You know what, I think there's a mistake in there. Somebody pointed it out to me. It says that where this is a type 1, whereas this is a type 1 action, it's just where it's unlisted. Because I'm sorry, I should have picked up on that. You took the resolution from the last time we did an ag deck, but it's no longer a type 1 because there's not 25 acres involved. If it's 25 acres, but once we took the other properties, it became unlisted. So it's where it's an unlisted action.
So whereas the adoption of said local law is an unlisted action?
Yeah. The EAF is right, but just the resolution wasn't right.
Okay, I'm gonna read it then. Whereas the Board of Trustees has proposed the local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district, and whereas adoption of said local law is unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and whereas the Board of Trustees has reviewed the environmental assessment form related to said local law and determined that such adoption will have no negative environmental impacts, now therefore be it resolved that a negative declaration under secret is issued. I will make the motion if I can have a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then the next is the adoption of the actual local law. And then everything's good here. Just go ahead and read it. Whereas adoption of a local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district is an unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And whereas the Board of Trustees has determined that such adoption will have no negative environmental impacts and therefore issued a negative declaration, now therefore be it resolved to adopt the local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district. I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now in a, unrelated but related item, there's a Board of Trustees support for affordable housing resolution. I don't know if anybody would like to say anything about this. We talked about it generically 2 meetings ago. We discussed it at a work session, but I don't know if anyone wants to say anything beyond the fact that this board has said for years that we support affordable housing, and we wanted to actually have a resolution that people could point to showing that support. Is that enough to be said at 10:20 at night? Whereas the Board of Trustees recognizes the need for affordable housing, both within the village and regionally, and whereas the village's comprehensive plan and early adoption of Westchester County's model inclusionary zoning provision reflect the importance of the creation of affordable housing, and whereas the annual goals set by the Board of Trustees for the past decade have consistently emphasized affordable housing as one of its top priorities, and whereas since its formation in 1990, the village's housing committee has consistently supported efforts to establish affordable housing in Irvington. And whereas in addition to zoning laws that include incentives for affordable housing, the creation of affordable housing requires funding subsidies from different levels of government, including local government. And whereas the village's history includes direct funding support for affordable housing, as in the case of the burning building, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees pledges its support for the creation of affordable housing in the village of Irvington, and further resolved that the Board of Trustees stands ready to provide meaningful support for the creation of affordable housing, for example, in the form of capital improvements, capital investments, tax abatements, and other legal means available. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now for what I think everyone came for tonight, appointment of personnel in the water department. Larry, any setup to this?
No, so this is an advancement of one of our employees. They continue to become more qualified and licensed at higher levels. And this is a promotion to reflect that for Stephen Cipriano.
Yeah, great. Resolved to appoint Stephen J. Cipriano to the contingent permanent position of water and sewer maintenance worker grade 1 at an annual salary of $81,984, effective June 8th, 2021, subject to completion of a probationary period of not less than 12 weeks and not more than 52 weeks. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next is authorization to approve change order number 14 for Matheson Park Playground renovation project.
Yes, so this is one that I had referred to it in a previous meeting, but this is one we were waiting on for it's for ADA accessible ramp in the vicinity of the bathroom building. So from the bathroom building down to the pathway, you can kind of picture the grades that are involved there. So there's a bit of construction that's necessary for this, but again, a required portion of the project.
Okay, anyone have any questions? Do we have any update, Larry, on a possible opening end of the month? I heard maybe.
We're pushing for the end of the month, but boy, there's a few things that are in our way right now. Lots of delays and back orders on certain materials. Just a bunch of difficulties, but we'll try to give you a better update as the month goes along.
Anyone has done any kind of renovation, it's materials are just impossible to get. So
yeah, we're still going forward, just not as fast as we want.
I hear you. Resolved to approve change order number 14 in the amount of $966 for the revision of the ADA ramp and to authorize the village administrator to execute said change order. I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Reports of boards, standing committees and officers, trustee liaison reports. Mark?
Don't have anything new at the moment.
Larry?
Nothing for tonight.
Connie?
Nothing tonight except go to the
Thursday night?
on Thursday.
And Janice?
Real quick, for the library, there is a state law pending for ebook access through the libraries, and apparently there's some opposition built to that law. So librarians across the state are encouraging people to weigh in on this issue. To do so, please just get in touch with Rosemary Gatzik at the library, and she will give you the connection. Also, the library is now open for half-hour appointments. Please call to schedule. And the school just mostly wants us to thank the village and everyone in the community for their partnership during a very difficult year. We got through it with this proud and supportive family. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Village Administrator report.
So two things. One is that, as I had reported in a previous meeting, the village was awarded, I believe, about a total of $20,000 in grants related to our clean energy community designation. So I'll be in touch with the board about what that money can be used for, and we'll be formally applying for that by the middle of August. The second item is just to let the board know that the application for the Pomeroy marker associated with the burial ground on South Buckout Street and the memorial has been submitted. The deadline for that was today. Oh, I'm sorry, it was a letter of intent technically, and we'll see if we're invited to apply for an application or submit an application. That's it.
Okay, Village Clerk Treasurer's report.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
But you stayed the whole time, Brenda. Thank you. Mary Ann?
Actually, I do have something to say. I know you're probably all sick of hearing me, but this is, I noticed PJ's still on there, and this question had come up about right now that there's there's a condition on the Maxon property that house can't come down. And I just wanted to clarify that. The condition on the variance is only, they got a variance. Timex used to own the building and they used the whole property. And the was permitted office buildings occupied by a single owner or tenant. Maxon wanted to take the building, buy the building, but they couldn't use all the space and they needed to rent it out. So they needed to get a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals to have more than one tenant. So the condition of that variance was only, and the condition being that they have to keep the building up. That applied only as long as that building was used as an office for more than one tenant. So if it's used for an institutional use, which is permitted under the zoning, the condition doesn't apply. Or if the owner wants to use it as an office for just one person, they don't need the variance anymore and the condition doesn't apply. So it's not much, it's not really any, it's very little protection of the mansion. It's a protection as long as it's an office for more than one tenant. That's it.
Okay. Public comment.
Before we go on, I just wanted to say one thing, and that is to thank both Larry and Mary Ann for all the hard work they put into the zoning effort and getting all the numbers and questions and resources and experts input. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll echo too is that, you know, for the vast majority, you know, I think the conversation was very fruitful and respectful, and you know, it was rare that we kind of got into, you know, kind of a wasted back and forth on things that weren't relevant. It definitely happened, but I think people called it out as quickly as it started to happen. So, you know, I think this is it's been a great, you know, that the law was greatly improved by all the comments that we received, and you know, we couldn't have had as good a law or as good a zoning if we hadn't had all the comments. So, in public comment, Karen Schatzel.
Thank you. I'm speaking not for any organization or only for myself, but I want to thank this board for its openness, its receptivity to all opinions, and the courage that you have displayed in going forward with this. And I also want to say one thing to you, Mayor Smith, except that I'd like to address you as Brian, because I'm thinking of that little boy who was very upset about Field Point. And I remember that experience only too well also, because I remember the whole hillside was laid bare and the house was gone on top and everything. It looked so horrible. And all I could think of was, what have they done, the officials at the time? But time passed and the trees grew and the houses came up and Field Point has become a part of our community, just like other neighborhoods. And so many people have contributed to the community's life from Field Point. So just as Field Point came about, I have a feeling that we will have a different Irvington as a result of all this zoning, but it will be a different place for more people to enjoy and to contribute to the life of the community. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Otherwise, I will review
Okay.
review of action items. Sorry, I didn't have anything.
Brian, I see two more
There's a
hands.
couple.
Oh, sorry. PJ.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to address the point that Marion just mentioned about the role of the variance. I do think that, you know, however you come out on this decision, I do think like any fair-minded description of the before picture should include that variance, right? I mean, there's no doubt that that protection, such as it is, does actually exist. And that is essentially how Irvington handled historic preservation in the past. I don't think that that's in dispute, right? I mean, that we have a different take on historic preservation than, say, Tarrytown does, which has a tendency to landmark everything, even without owner consent. We're doing things in a way that's more sensitive to owner incentives, and that's completely fair. But if we're going to acknowledge that, then we should also acknowledge that there was this hard-won, fairly negotiated variance one on the Maxon property 65 years ago. Let me make a second point, and it'll be really quick, right? That mansion is, to some extent, is arguably compromised by the presence of the office building, okay? But it's also the office building that allowed that commercial use. I'd also point out that, as Marissa Marvelli pointed out, that the mansion is actually the very last of these pre-Gilded Age estates, right? So as I think everyone knows from checking their inbox, right, there is a presentation coming up at the Historical Society about the Gilded Age in Irvington. What about what happened before the Gilded Age? There's really only Sunnyside, which belongs to Tarrytown, and the Maxon property as a testament to what Irvington was like before the Gilded Age, when it was more country gentlemen rather than the titans of industry that were living here. I note that in passing. More importantly, the 1961 variance that allowed the construction of the office in front of the property, that still stopped at just one story. I think that's interesting, right? So it wasn't just Timex that negotiated that variance. It was actually the subsidiary of Timex that created gyroscopes for missile systems for the US. It was essentially a defense contractor. Right? So I have to ask myself, so what is it that kept a 1960s defense contractor, before there really was a historic preservation movement in this country, that stopped at just one story? You know, again, let me ask it another way, right? I'm sure that in your all personal lives, you are all very kind, reasonable people, okay? But where's the deference here, right? If a 1960s defense contractor has the sensitivity to stop at one building to avoid blocking this magnificent 170-year-old structure, why can't this enlightened board do the same? I mean, is it really that out of line to expect you to have the same standards as 1960s defense contractor. I don't think so. Also, Mayor Smith, you keep bringing up the fact that the properties haven't been used residentially in 50 years, 70 years. That's flat out wrong, okay? At least as the Maxon property is concerned, Stanley Rubenthal lived there until his death in 2013. Maybe not full time, but the man was either restoring that house or living in that house until 2013. That was less than 10 years ago, all right? I mean, that's not up for debate, right? Right. Similarly, the carriage house that the Holy Spirit Association uses at 108 North Broadway is being lived in, right? It's not called one family residential, but functionally it is lived in just like any other house. 50% of these 4 lots are used or are capable of being used right now as one family residential. True or false?
It's currently zoned one family residential, so it's true. Or it was until a few minutes ago.
Okay, then why keep on bringing up the fact that it hasn't been used as a one family residential in 70 years, right? Then that would be irrelevant.
Okay,
All
fine.
I'm trying to say is, sir, and I mean this with all respect, when I die in my house on Strawberry Lane, I mean, it's kind of incredible to believe that 7 or 8 years later, somebody would be rezoning it as something completely different just because I have died and no longer live there. That's obnoxious.
That's not why we did that, but.
Then why keep bringing it up, sir?
Because the vast majority of the use was commercial use.
50% sounds like the vast majority?
Brian, it's.
Yeah, we're not, but I don't even know what the point is. It was single family zoning, the whole place. So I don't understand. It's been mostly commercial use. The vast majority of the buildings, the footprint has been vast majority commercial use for years. You're debating that there's been commercial uses? I don't know where we're going with this, to be honest.
One of the bases for the rezoning has been that these properties are no longer used as one family. That is simply not true.
Okay.
Okay. Tom Thacker.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to thank the board for all the time that they spent on this rezoning and for all the consideration they gave to lots of different proposals that came from many different parts of the village, including the housing committee, even though I'm speaking as a private citizen here. And I also really want to applaud the board for unanimously passing the resolution saying that they support affordable housing in the village. I think this is a great signal to affordable housing developers who might be interested in one or more of the properties that come on the market, that the village will not stand in their way. And in fact, the village will assist them in getting the tax credits and other things that they need to do to see a project through. So I really appreciate that you passed that resolution. And again, thank you so much for all your hard work throughout this whole process.
Thank you, Tom. And thanks for all your help. You did a lot of groundwork for us and your whole committee, really. Okay, Larry, I think now we're really to action items. I don't think we have any, right? So I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session regarding collective bargaining, if I can have a second.
Second.
I was afraid I wasn't gonna get one. All in favor? Aye. You're gonna send a new link, Larry? All right, thank you. You're on mute, but we'll get a new link.
Okay,
You
goodbye,
have
everyone.
you have the link.